All right, we're live, and people are starting to trickle in according to StreamYard. 0 people are watching. Hopefully that will change at some point. But
and
for now,
commenting.
216. Here we go. They're definitely in the chat commenting. We have with us from Canada, it's half of a Canadian panel at the moment, with Ian Runkle and the illustrious Viva Frei, who's currently hiding from his home country and embarrassed by it.
They might try to euthanize for political dissidents. It's mental illness, so better mercy kill them.
Yeah, always a fun thing. You were just talking about that before the stream went live, David. Share with us what is going on with Canada and their love of euthanasia.
See, I talked about it yesterday, and look at this. I can share the comments here. Here, Eric, if you can bring it up, the link to the tweet. Or hold on, I'll send you. Now you can bring it up like that. I talked about it yesterday, but maybe there's new viewers here. Quebec is leading the world in euthanasia. What did they say? It represents over 7% of all death in Quebec for 2022.
That's amazing.
It's. I mean, I don't want to use genocidal too freely. It's the 3rd leading cause of death in Canada: doctor-assisted lethal jab-assisted suicide. And then the article, this came out, like the news came out in the Daily Mail in June. And then in August, Daily Mail puts out an update saying they're putting the brakes on it now. They're trying to make sure that they enforce the rules properly, because if you go to that tweet, the article says, what did it say here? No, in 2021 to 2022, Quebec found 15 assisted deaths, 0.4. That's nearly 0.5% of the 7%. I'm sorry, of the total did not follow the rules. In 6 of those cases, the person did not have a serious or incurable condition. A euthanasia that does not follow the rules has another word. It's called murder. It's called state-sanctioned murder.
Now, do people in Quebec know that they
go ahead, Ian.
can just leave Quebec?
Ian the robot.
Hold on, you went full robot there for a second, Ian.
I was saying, do people in Quebec know that they could just leave Quebec instead of going to the doctor?
Oh yeah, they're going to make a movie. It's going to be called Leaving Quebec. It's going to be like the sequel to Leaving Las Vegas. No, it's disgusting. It's terrifying. I'm just reading some of the words in the chat, and that tyrannical dictator François Legault, despite everything, last election cycle he actually picked up seats. He didn't get ousted from office. But it's crazy. So over 7% of all death in Quebec. For Canada now, in 2021, it was 3.3% of all death in Canada was euthanasia. And now they're expanding it to the mentally ill. They want to expand it to minors. They want to expand it to people who can't consent. It's at the same time.
Minors?
Yes, to minors. And then they're even discussing the provisions about when minors can't consent. Who consents? The parents. It is like people make the joke about post delivery abortion. I mean, it's just imagine a parent consenting to euthanize their minor who can't consent.
Or the parent saying, "You really pissed me off this week, Johnny."
They have a commission. They'll make sure that it's not an act of retribution.
Oh, really? I don't know. It doesn't sound like it's going well from what you're saying.
0.4%. They weren't terminally ill. They weren't actually sick. We made a mistake. Oopsie doodle. That's murder. It's murder. Sorry. How's everybody?
And then you mentioned the mentally ill. I'm trying to understand how the mentally ill can consent.
Oh, that's, as a lawyer, Chandler, that's a good question to ask. It was when Canada legislated this piece of legislation in 2016, 2017, because the Supreme Court said you can't deny people of the constitutional right to end their lives. Unsolicited, the Liberal MP, whoever it was, says, well, we don't want to deny the mentally ill of their constitutional right to terminate their own lives. But it's like too controversial of an issue, so we're going to put in a sunset clause. So there'll be an exclusion for 3 years. But that exclusion, it might have been in 2019, not 2016. Either way, that sunset provision sets into the sun in 2023. And so they're basically going to say that if you're mentally ill, if that's the incurable illness, you can be eligible for MAIDs, medical assistance in dying. And I asked the legal question.
I think there's another EU word for that, David, and it's not euthanasia.
It's called
that eugenics.
Well, that's eugenics is one, or I'll go with the 1939 term, mercy killings. It was Axion 44 that the Nazis used, where they ended the lives of the mentally ill, the mentally challenged, and they called it mercy killings. Trudeau's got his own euphemism. It's called medical assistance in dying, because euthanasia itself is too ugly a term.
Wow.
That's very disturbing.
It's not good.
Yeah, Canada's, you're number one. We're
number
one.
Oi.
With a bullet, so to speak. But good Lord. Is anybody fighting this? Is anybody suing over it? Is there any movement to change the law? It seems like a out.
No. It's only going the other way. Now you have some advocacy groups who are sort of raising the flag. You have, if it sounded hyperbolic that I was calling it, equating it to Nazi era stuff. I think it was the National Post. Hold on, Canadian euthanasia Nazi era. There was an article in Forbes. So don't anyone accuse it's not just radical Viva Frei who's doing this. It was Forbes who said it echoes Nazi era policies.
Well, it does though. I mean, it directly does. I'd love Joe's take on this if Joe's coming on, but that's it's a direct.
If it was
I mean,
anyone other than Canada, would the U.S. be coming down hard on them? Like if this was implemented, say, in Iran, do you think the U.S. government would take a different stance?
It's an interesting question. I mean, it's been
Depends
going
if we
on
had oil.
Well, they've been doing it in Europe. In Belgium, Netherlands are very lax on euthanasia, but there's lax, and then there's 7-point-some-odd% of total death in a province being government administered. It's actually just madness.
Wow. Okay, I don't know what to do with this super chat, but thank you, Rosalind Duke.
No legal advice. Just Google it. You can't.
Yeah.
Nobody can. Don't take legal advice from a lawyer online.
Well,
Here's a general answer. It depends. That's for free.
Waiting on the mod. Let's see. Well, okay. 0 Stanley Cups since 1993. They're going to cut you some slack. I'm almost like, is there a connotation there saying because you haven't done it, you're suggesting that for hockey members? I mean, I don't get it.
I'm not sure I get it either, but I do remember we made it close, and that was one of my first encounters with riots when I went down with my camera to document some riots when we got booted in the semis, I think, Montreal. But why do I think it's a bigger issue in Quebec than other areas of Canada? I think it's as big of an issue in Quebec as it is in Ontario. The numbers in Ontario are not quite that bad, but Quebec and Ontario generally lead the rest of Canada. I would say for good and for bad, but typically it's mostly just for bad in terms of progressive policy.
Is it because of a religious? There's more religion possibly in Western, or
no? I don't think so. I mean, the French Canadians are quite religious, typically religious Catholic. I mean, minus the separation of church and state. It could be because it has a more aging population. I mean, it
could it be a class issue, perhaps something to do with economic disparity.
Well, I don't know if it's I mean, I would presume just demographically it would be as statistically French Canadian, like 85%. I would imagine. It would be interesting to know if the demographics are statistical overrepresentation for French Canadians or under. I don't. I'll look to see if I can get those stats. But no, I'd say maybe just an older population in Quebec and a more proactive, progressive government. You know, it's a sign of mercy to allow people to willy-nilly end their own lives even when they're not terminally ill. Ontario's going to follow suit. British Columbia is pretty bad as well. And then the Alberta and Manitoba and Saskatchewan are wildly different. Saskatchewan actually had a decrease in medically assisted deaths compared to the rest, which all had like massive increases.
Okay, I just wondering if because it seems like the Western Canada, and I can be completely off base, like Alberta and on, is more conservative, and it seems to be the more conservative tend to be more religious and less likely culturally to off themselves, or whatever would be the appropriate term for YouTube, or to believe in that, versus the more progressive world, which I'm not trying to lay it out there, but tends to be more godless, tends to be less anchored in any kind of faith or things of that sort.
Runkle might be in a better position to answer this one.
Sorry, you guys are breaking up a little bit here. No, I'm serious. I'm switching off my VPN just so I can hear you guys.
Cool.
They're more conservative. Not out west, because you get to the far west, British Columbia, that's California.
Oh, yeah.
Forever Cuber, what is
not in the rural
diagnosis?
areas of BC, but yeah.
I think there is. I think they have an advanced consent for medical assistance in dying for someone who's suffering from Alzheimer's. I'm not sure about that though. Medical power of attorney says.
Well,
And by the way,
I do
blame
some
those.
medical advance directives a lot, and a lot of it is like, hey, listen, if I'm on a ventilator and can't communicate for like 60 to 90 days, just take me off of life support, and if I die, I die. What's the difference?
That is a big difference. I mean, that's saying you're not doing anything additive to keep them alive. Euthanasia is saying you are absolutely alive. We're finishing the job.
Yeah, but I mean, the
tell you, there's
person's
a big
intent is to
spectrum
just
difference there.
the person's
One's
intent is
perfect.
like, I don't want to live on a ventilator and be kept
I
alive by
understand.
machines, so just let me die, as opposed to
Okay.
expedite. I don't know.
Well,
I mean-
it is. On the one hand, some might argue it's the not assisted living versus the active lethal injection. I mean that has to be the distinction and the consent. So yeah, do not resuscitate and take me off a ventilator versus I'm depressed, end my life with a lethal injection. But then and then it's not to say that I genuinely believe in euthanasia when it's a terminal illness that
Exactly.
no, like pancreatic cancer it's just an ugly way, and it doesn't get better, save and except a few miracles where you get an extra few years out of your life. But what they're doing, it's in Canada.
Also,
it's
I'll
great.
point out that there are some, people who handle it here. Like my dad had essentially terminal cancer, and they gave him morphine. He had a fentanyl patch, and let's just say they were very generous with the morphine. Okay, and if he decided and he just kind of kept taking much morphine, nobody was going to complain about it. He didn't, in fact, do that, but there is some give and take. And if you're in that much pain, and he was in palliative care, it was completely different. But the whole I'm depressed or I'm upset or what have you, that starts to go a little bit far.
Do you remember?
At the end of the day, though, shouldn't it be the person who makes the call for themselves?
I guess.
So long as it's the person making the call for themselves, I don't really have an issue with it. The issue is when you start getting doctors who go like, well, wouldn't it be better if, and that kind of thing. That's where I start getting concerned. But if it's a person who's just like, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, if you're just walking down the street and you're like, you know what, I'm tired of this. I'm like, okay, cool. That's your call. You own yourself. So that's your call.
But the problem is, don't you already have an affirmative care problem in Canada already? I know Jordan Peterson's talked about that. Now I'm going to the trans issues, but it could be the same thing here. I don't know what the standards are, but in the case of trans, if somebody comes in and says, hey, I'm trans, this or that, from what I understand, psychiatrists, et cetera, in Canada have to say, absolutely, you are exactly what you are. I believe.
Yeah.
So are they
Self-ID.
doing the same thing with the whole, I am so depressed, it's not worth it? You're right. It's not worth it. I affirm everything you believe. I don't know if that's the case, but I'm questioning, is that the case? Shouldn't it be maybe a little bit of a challenge to, to make that choice, which is the absolute unchangeable choice. And it doesn't only affect the person. You're right, Ian. If somebody has a right. If they jump off the bridge and something happens, and they did that. But who are they harming? Well, themselves, but every single person around them. Don't they have a say? Don't loved ones, don't friends, don't people around have a say
No.
Absolutely
for somebody
not.
being potentially impulsive?
No, 100% no. If my activities make somebody else next to me sad, tough. I get to decide my life because there's plenty of things. I own guns. I got lots of guns. It makes some of my family members sad that I do. Tough shit. Like that, that is a level of social control, and that I'm just like, absolutely not.
Okay, so we're going to make a
I agree with
comparison here.
Well, that's the very
I have a gun and
libertarian
they're
view.
sad, and that's the equivalent of offing myself. Absolute parallel there, Ian.
Well, let's
That's a
say
perfect
you decide
comparison.
to get into an interracial marriage, and your family
Okay.
really hates that. F
Sure.
them. Like,
No, but
they
I'd
don't
say
get a call.
the only See, it's a distinction between life and all other decisions. There has to be a fundamental value of life, and it's not to say, look, at the end of the day, somebody can take their own lives if they're so determined. But once we abandon the deterrence at all costs, healing at all costs, because it's not a normal thing, it's not a healthy thing. Obviously, it's unhealthy to think under normal circumstances to end one's life, and so there should be the positive obligation to deter that. The question is, in how do you allow it for mental illness and then at the same time have suicide help hotlines? I mean, what's that going to look like in Canada? If someone made the joke like dial 4 for assistance, dial 5 for assistance. I'm like, oh, which assistance do you mean?
This whole thing makes me think of Futurama, like the suicide booths, in the year 3000.
Mm-hmm.
Are we moving towards that?
Swiss guy designed a suicide pod. I mean, they're going to try to talk about administering that or implementing it elsewhere.
I've seen that.
You want to get conspiratorial. For a country that can't carry its own infrastructure as far as healthcare systems goes, this saves money to allow people to off themselves prematurely so they don't drain the system. It comes at a time also where out east they're passing some presumed consent organ tissue donation laws, Avery's Law out of New Brunswick or Nova Scotia, and so you get the removal of the carbon footprint on Earth. You get the Canada's population is going down, so we got to double its population via unlimited immigration. You got healthcare system is overwhelmed, so let's let the sick and even the mentally ill kill themselves. It'll be cheaper for the system, and then we can harvest their organs because it's presumed consent, which are laws. Not to get too Alex Jonesian, but it's starting to sound a lot like some stuff that some people have been saying for some time.
Let me. Okay, how many people agree that I said that?
Eric advocating for governing a person by life.
By Comite. And I'm guessing they mean committee. How many people say I
heard you use the word impulsive. That the family should be concerned about the person being impulsive.
Yeah. I did
and
hear
the consideration to other people. So I don't think you said that.
I heard you.
I love when people put words in my mouth. But thank you very much. I'm so glad that I have people.
You know what? I'll stand up for that. I think you said committee. You implied committee. No, I'm just
Thank you.
I would agree with. I'm more in line with Runkle. A person has the right to choose, in my opinion. They should have the right to choose. What I don't like is other people influencing them, whether it's society, doctors, other people influencing their decisions. I missed the first part of it, so I don't know how young this applies to. But if we're talking about someone who is older and has a terminal disease, I'm all for it.
But that's already everybody agrees on that part.
I think it
pretty much agrees on that. But
so what did Canada do then? They're talking about children being able to do this, like 17.
Yeah, their parents can consent for them.
So dumb. That I don't agree with, because that's literally committee, right?
Well,
I mean, that's the parents' society.
There are cases I've seen with children with severe terminal illnesses where they're suffering significantly and substantially and dying very, very slowly. And I think that as far as, affording dignity to somebody who is suffering that much, I think that that's a humane thing to do. But I think it should be rare and case by case. And I can see, I remember there was a case of a little girl who, specifically said, I do not want to live anymore. And she was maybe 9 or 10 years old. It was very, very sad, but the family agreed. And, everybody around her agreed that this would be best for her. And I think that in general, if the person and the family, they all agree that this would afford dignity and this would be a reasonable end and a more meaningful end than watching their loved one suffer and their loved one having to suffer. I think that makes sense. It sounds like, yes.
Terminal is different than depressed.
Mentally ill is entirely different. With mental illness, mental illness can improve over time, especially if mental illness is. If we're talking about mental illness in children, is that what we're discussing? Because
I'm talking about it actually. Period. That I guess I just see it, and I feel the same way by others. It shouldn't be easy. It shouldn't just be go in, do your self-immolation chamber, and have a nice day. I think that maybe just an offer of some treatment, like let's really look into why you want to do this. Are you committed? Are you committed? Are you committed? Well, maybe you should be committed. But anyway, maybe just don't make it too easy. And part of the reason I say this is they've done studies from people who have jumped off, I think it's the Brooklyn Bridge or whatever. And it's fascinating because they found these people who lived, because many of them actually did live. It was an impulsive act.
Golden Gate.
And that's actually something that scares the bejesus out of me, truthfully, because they don't even feel that way mentally now, like they're depressed and they want that. For some reason, impulsively, they took this step. And I'm saying, why not just say, hey, you know what? The state's going to pay for it. We're going to make you earn it. Okay. We're just going to make you have to take another step. I don't think that's an unreasonable statement to say, are you sure? Are you really sure? Anything to just have a pattern interrupt in case it's impulsive, in case treatment might help them later. It's not a terrible thing to.
I mean, that's always kind of built in as compared to, say, the bridge, because it's not just like you turn left for medically assisted, you know, or for MAID, and they just like stab you with a syringe and down you go. It's like you got paperwork. It's going to be weeks of like processing it. So it's not like it's, hey, I just jumped off something and changed my mind on the way down, because you've had weeks to go like, nah, I was feeling bad. I don't want to anymore. Like, throw my paperwork in the trash. They're not about to like roll up to your house and be like, nope, you started the form. You know, it's go time. But
is anybody addressing your problem that took you to that point, or the situation that took you to that point? Are there possibly other answers or alternatives? And this is just such a convenient path. And you know what? It works well for us. Okay. We don't have to treat you later. We don't have to do anything. You're out of our hair. Bye-bye.
This is really the crux of the problem, is that it really takes the pressure off of government and off of various other places to try to like solve these issues. If you've got somebody, you know, we see situations, there have been issues with like veterans who are like, hey, I'm not getting the care I need. I'm supposed to be entitled to, you know, because of my military service, I'm supposed to be entitled to, someone's got to build me a wheelchair ramp because I can't get upstairs anymore. And they can't get that done. They're like, well, that's going to take years, but we can off you like in 3 months.
Well, and that actually happened. That was one of the cases in Canada.
Yeah. Yeah. So at that point, I'm going, this is the problem, is when it becomes the out for government.
Yeah.
So that's where I get really concerned, is when they start saying we don't have to provide these services. We don't have to. And it could actually start shaping medical care, because people with these like really terminal, painful conditions, you might see that it's like, well, why bother researching cures for that? People just going off themselves and no problem. That starts to get to be where the problems are. I mean, I'm big on personal autonomy and personal liberty, even so far as making decisions that other people really hate, so long as they're, you know, in your interests. But it does become a big problem if, But
guess what? Libertarians don't want to do. They don't want to pay for other people's shit. So that's another factor that I want to throw in too. If I don't agree with people doing things trivially, in my opinion, or without enough thought, I don't want to pay for it, okay? And that money isn't free from the clouds and the government. Part of the population may absolutely disagree with this and not believe in it and don't want to pay for it. So there's another angle for people to consider.
I mean, the cost is super cheap.
I don't care how much it is. I don't care if it's $10.
But that's the argument that every libertarian makes about roads and war and everything else. You know,
and the thing is,
you shouldn't have to pay for that.
I'm libertarian-ish, because my sort of belief on this is that the purpose of government is to maximize liberty as experienced by the most people. And, you know, a lot of libertarians have this, in my view, kind of naive notion of, if you just get rid of government, suddenly everyone's going to be, it's going to be this liberty paradise. And instead, what it's going to be is the guy with the biggest stick setting up warlords and
it'll be Somalia
else.
Or Sudan. Yeah. Totally agree.
So,
but I'm just pointing out another element to it where people do have
there's literally no condition that people have where the impact of them or the cost impact of them offing themselves is not like where that isn't the cheaper option. And that's a problem in terms of incentives. But in terms of saying, like, I don't want to pay for it, you're going to pay more to not have it in any circumstance. That's actually the incentive problem. is
Well, it
yeah.
depends. I would get rid of half of the other things that you're paying for too. But anyway, we won't go into that.
I'll take the
Exactly.
what might be the anti-libertarian perspective. I don't think people should. It should not be criminal, but people should not be allowed to kill themselves. It's not a rational decision. I'm not going to take the religious perspective that it's not your life to take in the first place. It was given from something beyond you, but obviously you don't make it criminal because arresting or jailing someone who survived a suicide attempt is obviously pretty stupid. But it should be not encouraged. It should not be promoted. It should be every step to deter it in normal circumstances should be implemented. And when it comes to terminally ill with no chance of recovery, nothing but a life of misery, pain, and cancerous suffering, obviously, it's a no-brainer. We do it to our beloved animals, and there's no reason why it should be denied that right to die with dignity. But otherwise, suicide is fundamentally and not a rational decision. And so entertaining the idea that people should be allowed to cave into their irrational decisions, which some might argue are themselves a form of mental illness, that's not libertarian. That's just allowing someone who's sick to do something to themselves that they would otherwise regret.
It's not always irrational. And in fact, at times we've done things like given people medals for it. One of the classic examples is guy who's separated from his troop, is realizing that he's being overrun by the enemy and just gets on a radio and says, "Artillery strike, my location." And that's a classic example. Your
analogies, Ian.
There's also suicide by cop. Suicide by cop is a thing.
Sorry.
If you don't want to pay for it.
It's a classic example where we consider it to be both heroic and also justified. This guy would probably survive if he just said, "You know what? I'm going to surrender. I'll spend the rest of this war out in a POW camp." But we still consider it to be a heroic act at that point. We've given medals for stuff like that.
I'm gonna just I will respect
that analogy
and say that's
and
a horrible analogy.
Suicide by cop.
Is it? What's wrong with the analogy?
That's
you say
not
it's
suicide.
horrible.
It's a selfless surrender for strategic advantage, and also
it's still suicide. Like the guy knows he's dying by calling an artillery strike, and he could likely surrender.
Okay, I'm just going to say really quickly, if I may, my contribution on this. I had a professor in college who I didn't get to take his course, but I got to sit in on like 2 weeks of his lectures. And his whole field of study was suicide and homicide. And I think his name is Stefan Timmermans. He had a theory that essentially suicide is always going to occur. We will always have suicide. We will always have homicide. That will always be built into society. It's not preventable. It's not something that you can, reduce necessarily. People will always end up taking their lives. People will always end up taking the lives of others. And there is very little that you can do to prevent it. And so that has always stuck with me as a very interesting concept. I don't know exactly what you do with it, but it's food for thought.
Well, I think there's very little you can do to prevent it, but there's certainly stuff you can do to deter it and to treat it as opposed to normalize it.
Yes.
But Eric, bring up that chat, the blue one. Why am I not histrionic? By the way, is a loaded term. It's the
okay.
I like you as much more muted on this topic than on Twitter. First of all, I believe I was relatively histrionic in the beginning, but histrionic sort of implies like irrational. What's the word? Irrational.
That is true. Yeah, it is loaded.
I was quite enraged by this, but also I have more than 280 characters to flesh out my position. So I'll call François Legault a state-sanctioned murderer or a state-sanctioning murder, whatever. But yeah, Twitter it's just a different method of discourse. They're murderers.
All right. Well, that's a good opening topic. And by the way, folks,
that really woke
me
up.
Super chats. I am waiting for the demonetization to come crashing down at any point.
We only said the word suicide 12,000 times.
How can they demonetize you for it? No, they can't demonetize you for it. It's government policy in Canada. They're going to demonetize.
That doesn't mean anything, dude.
You have to call it self-unaliving or some such other. YouTube.
Well, that's why I was saying off. On my other show we have Harry Carey, and because literally the S word has gotten us not only demonetized but adult content. I'm not kidding. Where people. And it would be one use of that. And seppuku is good. Anyway.
Wait, are they saying it's porn? Astounding. Who uses that for? No,
saying,
I'm not making that joke. Or not finishing that joke right
now. You know what, though? Actually, thank you, Ian. That brings us to a case that somebody sent to me. I haven't looked too deeply into it. I think I sent all of you guys a link to it in
The
DMs or
revenge
something.
porn case.
This
It's a very
case.
interesting case. I've actually handled
prawn.
a couple
We
of
can't
these.
say the P word, guys. Prawn, I
Oh,
think, is the
sorry.
while we're
Yes.
on YouTube. Let's just have fun here.
Revenge.
But then how do you know if you're not
Revenge
talking about a
prawn.
how do you know if you're not talking about a crustacean that went on a revenge spree and just killed all the other prawns?
You might be. You know, those are some frisky shrimp there, David.
You know what? I'm
sounds
getting
like-
on Midjourney and I'm making that image right now.
I think I saw one of those at the anime convention in Houston.
Revenge
A,
prawn.
a revenge prawn.
Okay,
Texas
well, this
woman-
woman
I haven't heard
is
this story.
awarded 1.2 Alex Joneses.
Is that
Yeah, that's
now
an
our,
amazing amount of money.
is that
So-
now our method of measurement?
I think it's a good one, don't you?
Yeah,
I
well,
like
that's
it.
what
No,
Alex Jones.
Into
just
it.
to show how absurd it is, I had at the time, not to be callous, but compared the Alex Jones Award to what the Armenians were requesting for compensation for the Armenian genocide, which I think was only 3 times the Alex Jones Award. So this woman's getting 1.2 billion. Let me see what they were looking for in terms of reparations, and I'll come back. What's this story?
Well, the actual damages, I think, was 200 million, which is crazy enough. So 200 million. This woman's images are worth $200 million. This isn't Kim Kardashian here, folks. I've never heard of this person. She's worth $200 million. So that's the actual damages. Then it's an Alex Jones and punitive. Help
It
me
sounds
out
like it
with that.
damaged her career. I have not yet read the article, but I would presume that the damages were measurable.
Yeah, I
I've
mean,
actually
Well,
handled one of
it
these
says
cases
mental
with-
anguish,
They're-
and it says mental anguish, and that leaves the jury a lot of room to do whatever they want to do based on
Yeah.
what they're
Well,
told.
it's preposterous. Even if the guy, I presume her boyfriend doesn't have $1 billion, it's to be deterrent. It's to let everybody know that this
Oh,
is going to be the worst
he's,
thing you can do.
he's impecunious. He's got no money. They already have acknowledged that this is a blood from a stone situation. It's just they want to. It's not about the money. It's about sending a message. Is
Well, and the
it's just like
message is that it's a ridiculous verdict. That's the message. It's like
It is a ridiculous verdict.
we've taken something that's really horrible, because I'm not excusing what the person may or may not have done. I don't know the details, and then turned it into a farce. Which anybody else who is suffering this, how is that a deterrent when you're like, oh, they're just going to come up with ridiculous sums that nobody could ever pay, and it's just something silly?
Well,
How
it
does
goes
that
into that
serve?
it goes into that database for plaintiffs' attorneys of where can I find juries who will give me large verdicts for mental anguish, because that's what the article you just said is mental anguish, and that's kind of a runaway jury verdict for it. Not like you said, they wouldn't be outraged and all that, but is there anybody whose mental anguish is worth $200 million? And then if one person's isn't the next person's? And
Well,
if it
You
was
know what
two,
was interesting in that article, though, is that they said the judge hasn't issued the judgment yet, and that's coming like in the next couple of days, which leads
Yeah.
me to think that there's a cap
Hmm.
and that the judge has to reduce it, and that the
Yeah, but-
actual judgment
well,
is going to be substantially less.
just Eric,
apparently
pull up-
the plaintiff's lawyers said that they expect the judge is going to sign off on it, and I'm like,
Really?
in what universe do you expect the judge is going to sign off on this without?
We'll
Well,
do-
apparently the man also stole money from her bank account, and there were harassment components. There were other elements here at play. So I could see damages occurring if there were actual monetary, if there's monetary theft. It sounds like there was.
Agreed.
Yeah.
let's just call. We're
$200
gonna
million. That's all.
Let's-
Every time you say something, I'm just going to repeat myself.
just
It is-
call it the Chester P. Lantwick judgment. Play the roll the clip.
It's an
Eric.
absurdly large
$800 million
amount.
dollars.
Oh,
Wait, do it again.
This
Do it
is
again. No, you got to do it again. We got to hear the whole thing. 800.
$800 million.
That's when he's suing. He's suing Itchy and Scratchy. How much you suing me? You come in here off the street claiming to own Itchy and Scratchy, and you're suing me for how much? 800. So yeah, no, it's called the
Okay.
Chester. But I just call it bankrupting judgments. Okay, something is so bad, can't put a number on it. It will be
Billions
more
upon
than-
billions of them.
So everyone
Well-
agrees that judgment is ridiculous.
Yes.
All right, but here's my question: how do you value the damages, the damages in this type of case? How do you value that? What's the matrix that we use? What metrics do we use? How do we value this?
I mean,
Okay,
it's
well,
going to be tough because you
First,
can
find the
never
harm.
Right,
never get these
potential.
images off the internet. It's just
Right.
impossible. It does affect people because I know people who've had
Of
this
course.
happen to them, and they get emails from people going, "Oh, I've got your nudes," and either trying to blackmail more stuff out of them or blackmail money out of them or whatever. But I don't think it's 200 million plus a billion punitives. Like, I don't think that, I don't think it gets there.
This is what I did. I said, okay, if those pictures were put up on OnlyFans, right?
Mhm.
How much could you generate from them on average?
Mhm.
And they're going to be up for the rest of your life. You're this old, you're expected to live this long, and there's our formula. And
No,
that's
but
the damage number that I
that-
came up with.
No, but that's
I've got another one to add to that.
No, because
Dave.
What about
Well,
potential earning, like earning potential
Exactly.
for the future? You know, if this woman can't get a job because if you Google
Yeah.
her, that'll come up, and so she's
Professional
not going to
reputation.
be, she won't be
Yeah.
hireable. So what is her career worth? You know, where was her career going? What was the trajectory? How much was she making? Was she fired because of this? Was she not able to, you know, secure another position? You know, that's something that could be potentially calculated. I don't know
what
about
are
the
actual
I don't know how to
psychological
calculate.
injuries. Like,
How do you
know,
calculate pain
you
and
need
suffering
therapy.
though? I've always wondered that, like intentional infliction of emotional distress. I actually really don't know how you calculate pain and suffering. Is there a formula for that?
No.
No.
Not
really.
really.
The
It's just
other
kind
thing-
of
By
up
the
to
way,
the jury.
I
The other
agree
thing
with
that gets-
both formulas, just as a jury mindset, that yes, how much money is actually being earned on those photos from whomever, and how much professional status or standing or career has the person lost, all that, and then say double it or triple
that
it,
will-
you know,
will-
for that. But that's not nowhere near 200 million, most likely.
Well,
Typically,
that's where the
there's no,
anguish comes in.
Typically, there's no earnings from the people who are doing this because they just post them on free sites and so forth. And it's not for money. Typically, it's just to do damage. Like, that's the
Sure.
goal. But the thing I get concerned about is perverse incentives. And what I mean by that is that it's actually quite difficult to prove where and how these images got online. And so, I mean, they just kind of show up on these image boards. And then people, like, those image boards don't respond to subpoenas. They're often like located in some country that is unfriendly to the US or Canadian judicial system. So it's like, hey, we're sending you a demand for who posted this. And it's like, tough. We don't care here in whatever country. But the problem that you get then is if it's worth $1 billion, well, then now every celebrity or whatever needs to get really concerned, because if they sleep with somebody, suddenly a picture ends up online. And then it's like, I blame this person. I never posted it. How do you prove they didn't?
Do you remember
And-
that once that when all of the celebrity nudes got leaked onto Reddit or something like that? It was like, you know, like Jennifer
fappening.
Lawrence and
The
yes, I
fappening.
didn't want to refer to it by its name, but yes, that is what. Thank you.
Well, I mean, we're talking about it in the public, yeah.
Yeah, and that was I don't recall if there was anything legal that came from that, but I think that would be very interesting to discuss.
I think people went to prison, actually.
Really?
I
Did they really?
believe that. I think that a couple hackers that were involved in it went to prison. There's also a Netflix show I recommend for everybody called The Most Hated Man on the Internet, I believe it's called. And this guy was called the King of Revenge Prawn. And he just unabashedly was like, screw you. I'm just a platform. People upload to me. What are you going to do? Well, that wasn't quite enough. First off, it turns out he was working with a hacker who was stealing the material and putting it up there. So they got him criminally. I think he just got out of prison himself a year or two ago. But they've also done serious damage to the quote, I am just a platform. That's why you have Prawn Hub having to do age verifications and different things. There's a lot of back and forth on it. And there is a lot of movement from what I understand, even in these quote unquote free sites, even if they're from a country who doesn't respect our laws, they can also be blocked. You know, there are certain IPs and things like that that can be blocked. And they can push back, especially if there's any kind of investment that's over here. There are agreements with other countries that can be put into place, you know, different treaties that can pull these people up. I believe some Russian hackers have been taken down, others who you would think, too bad, nothing's going to happen. But also, a lot of the countries are unfriendly with us, like, say, Iran. Will not accept this kind of behavior on the internet themselves, culturally speaking. So they'd probably be even worse shape if they tried to put it in a country like that. That would be even more dangerous to them.
I I shared
Well-
a relevant video link in the. It's not prawn. It's not seafood. It's just someone complaining about her seafood being exposed online.
Oh, I
And
got a
people
couple in
not
here. Hold
paying
on.
for it.
Ian shared something too. I'm having trouble keeping up with everybody. Hold on.
TS money, keep your
I was
schmeckle
muted.
in your pants is the proper strategy here.
Oh, the prawn.
The
love it.
revenge prawn.
Boy, that is a revenge prawn. That's actually kind of scary.
I have to-
Looks
I
very
have so-
vengeful.
And then
You
what do
did
we
that with-
have here?
You did that with AI, Ian?
With Midjourney, yeah.
Can you send me the link to that Midjourney?
That's impressive.
Yeah, it's a Discord thing, but yeah, I can send you sort of the details there.
Can I play this?
Oh, you
out
can play this.
loud?
Yeah. First of all, I don't even know why she's saying. I don't know who this person is. I
Oh
just saw the video.
yeah, everybody's
This
been
is
talking
the
about
ice
this
cream
video.
liquor, or I think it's ice cream liquor girl.
Well,
or
her
something.
name
She's
is-
like,
Her name is Ice Cream So Good, and when
that's
I went,
that's what she does. Goes ice cream so good, and it's like a weird loop thing. One of those TikTok loops. They're
oh, so it's not. There's no actual nudes then. It's just her licking ice cream.
No. She has an OnlyFans apparently that leaked, and they're go look her up.
No, but dude, I
Go-
first of all, I went, I did Ice Cream So Good images, and luckily I just got pictures of ice cream, so then I stopped my search. But I don't know. Yeah,
All right,
it's
well let's
fun,
see.
yeah.
Here,
So I went to Google. I put Pinky Doll naked, and I click on pictures. And what I
Neat.
see, there's a lot of page. You keep swiping and swiping and swiping. It don't stop. And I see all this website. How dare you? You gonna let other people put my face, my body out here doing stuff like that? How dare you? Without asking an
Pinky
ID.
Doll.
Where's the ID terms? Tell
Where's
me
she
that.
from?
What's up? I'm
What
gonna
accent
tell
is
you
that?
something today. I'm gonna sue all of you. All
Sounds
of you are
islandy.
gonna sue you. I'm gonna sue you. Y'all
I
wanna
thought she
play
was
with me?
French.
You allow other people post Pinky Doll? Really? Cause you know you're about to get paid? Well, guess what? I'm about to get all that money.
all right, now this show
Did she win
sometimes is
1.2
called
billion?
educating. This show sometimes called
Oh.
Educating Viva Frei. So now, David, please do your obligatory Google search for Pinky Doll, and go to images and turn off safe search, and then
don't-
report back to us.
Okay, but I'll first say I thought she had a French accent, and I thought she was from France.
Oh, she
What-
is French. Somebody's saying
What am I saying?
Okay.
Pinky Dog?
Pinky Doll.
Pinky Doll.
She's
Creole?
from fingernail land.
Oh, that's
it looked like to me.
Okay, and now I'm gonna go to images. Okay, so I see her with a mustache. Okay, so far
No,
nothing.
Take safe search off. Did you
be
type in
very
Pinky Doll
careful.
naked?
I'm gonna do
You didn't
that.
say naked.
Peer
Yeah.
pressure.
She told you what to search for. In her own video, she told you what to search for.
Yeah.
$7,000 a
Yeah,
day.
she's not mad. She's advertising. She's
Yes.
advertising. I completely agree. I saw, but we have a super chat. I completely agree with this. That is not outrage. That is really bad acting.
What are they
I've seen a
telling
lot
me?
of bad acting. I've
Some of
been
these
in LA
pictures,
for
she's
long
wearing
time.
she's wearing a bikini here. Big deal. Okay, so that one's not so graphic.
She's
Okay,
telling
you have
people to
safe
search
search
it
on.
because they're not gonna find it.
All
She's
right,
just
well,
hoping that they get to her OnlyFans.
I'm gonna stop. My computer is clean, so I'm gonna not.
Okay,
Because
just
if
trust
you're
me,
actually
it's-
outraged, you don't give the search terms to go find it. Like
Right.
that, like, you know,
Oh,
I was so pissed off, I went to this YouTube channel, Runkle of the Bailey, and it had all of this pro-gun stuff. So if you hate that stuff, don't go to Runkle of the Bailey on YouTube. Like, that's a pitch. You know,
on the topic, on a more wholesome side, Jenny O'Brien says, "Viva, I saw the video of your daughter and the fish on Daily Mail Animal. Don't know if you knew they were using the video." Oh, I know that video. The video. Don't play it. Not for bad reasons. You'll get copy claimed because it's under license. That video apparently had 44 million views on their Facebook reshare of it. If anybody hasn't seen it, my middle kid hand feeding a tarpon, a dead minnow at Robbie's Marina in Isla Morada in the Keys, and a 6-foot tarpon. It like gobbled her arm up to the elbow, but they don't have teeth. And then everyone's like, "That's so dangerous! What a terrible father you are!" And I'm like, "That's the tourist attraction at Isla Morada, Robbie's Marina." Hashtag not an ad. You have to go do it. It's the coolest thing on earth. Yeah.
Definitely agree. Okay,
I
so
went to
let's-
Google.
Let's talk about another new subject that's come up. there's a name that has suddenly popped into now.
Go on.
Somebody tell me who's Robert Peters.
I don't know.
That's the president.
Oh,
Wait, what?
Hold on.
please share.
Let me go Google this right now.
Yes,
Robert
that's the president.
Peters naked.
Robert
Oh,
Peters.
sorry.
And you can leave safe search on because it's only for money. That's all he
So
needs. for
Robert
it.
Peters in the nude. Joe Biden's Robert Peters suited him under scrutiny. Holy shit. I'm going live this afternoon. I'm done. Oh my goodness. Robert Peters. I was going to make a joke about penis because Peter is another word for penis. Robert Peters.
Pedo Pete.
Oh my goodness.
That was the name in Hunter's phone. Remember that? I mean, this isn't that hard to connect all these things together.
Oh, God. So are you going to say
Interesting.
he's running Robert L. Peters ice cream parlor?
I am saying that they are saying that a lot of the emails involving this business stuff were conducted with pseudonyms, and Robert Peters was one of them, so that Joe Biden could communicate on email without his name showing up.
Specifically, Robert L. Peters. That's correct.
Yes, the
Sorry.
L is an important part of it. It wasn't the only one, aply, though.
Who are the
He
cops
had
coming for
some
here?
others too, but yeah, somebody's
he-
getting arrested.
So he's taking an L on this one.
No. Yeah.
That's what. That's what. So hold on. What does the article say?
Let's go ahead and pull it up.
It's amazing. And then meanwhile, they're gonna, go and accuse Trump of doing everything that Joe Biden or Robert L. Peters apparently is doing.
All right. His emails from his time as vice president are coming under renewed scrutiny over his apparent use of the pseudonym Robert L. Peters and other names. So apparently he was using this pseudonym possibly while communicating, especially with, the paragon of humanity, Hunter, and different business dealings. I haven't gone deep into it. I figure that one of you guys have been digging it up. Steve, you could take over if you've got, much
Well, you
more
never go
knowledge here.
horny on Maine, so
well,
this is probably like his.
yeah, the
Covert
story here
account.
is this: the most obvious thing on the planet is that the Bidens were selling influence to get money, right? That doesn't mean that I love Trump and Trump's great or Trump's bad or anything. Let's just talk about Biden. Because one of the reasons the Democrats ended up with Biden is because they were so consumed with this anti-Trump fury, and they had other candidates who weren't as crooked as this guy. Although I think the selection of Biden and then eventually saying that he was voted for was partially because of how corrupt he is. That's just my opinion, which I'm allowed to have. And his crackhead son generated a large stream of income as the guy who kind of handled all this stuff for the family. And so they all made a lot of money off of it. And it's just exceedingly clear. How much evidence do you have to have thrown in your face of the money flowing into this family? And then, of course, using pseudonyms and things like that to facilitate that. It's just more evidence of that. And there's some speculation, which I don't disagree with, that some of this is out now because the Democrats want to see him ride off into the sunset. They want some pressure on him so that they can replace him. And maybe that's true. So that's certainly my opinion, is that I don't think, there's most of them are crooked in some way or the other, but it was particularly brazen with the Bidens. And I think that's unfortunate. And maybe he's going to sail away. I don't think this presidential thing, as crazy as it is right now with what they're trying to do to Trump and with how crooked Biden is, that they're trying to conceal that we're not even out of Act One yet. Because who knows what the Democrats are going to do with the real person who's going to be president, and who the hell knows what's going to happen on the Republican side.
Will they both be running from a cell? That's what a lot of people wonder. It's like, will they both be running from a cell?
Yeah, well, I'm in favor of putting prison bars around the White House and just maybe all of D.C. turn it all into a prison and then turn off the internet.
Yeah, people are always like, lock him up, lock her up. And I'm like, they're politicians. Most of them probably belong away from society, because very few politicians I've ever encountered have been like people I would invite into my house.
Yeah, I don't trust any politicians. They're all crooked. Isn't that common knowledge? Doesn't everybody know that?
No,
maybe this is
they
Biden's
don't know
perfect opportunity to step aside, to spend more time smelling people, like,
Yes.
I don't know what his
Sharing
hobbies
ice
are,
cream
but
and sniffing hair. Is that what you're saying?
yeah.
Sniffing small children, unfortunately. Oh God. Yeah, he's not
Oh,
a.
so
The
Daddy
Democrats
owed
do
you
not
ice
like
cream
Biden.
the
They're
other
not
day?
happy with him.
Well, I will say that I don't think that you're far off completely, Steve, because has anybody noticed that there's somebody out there campaigning like crazy who hasn't actually registered to run for presidency?
Gavin
Has anybody
Newsom.
noticed? Yeah, Gavin Newsom is everywhere all the time. Yeah,
He's always
it's your fault,
texting me and
Chandler.
emailing me. He's constantly texting me, emailing me, and I'm just like, shut up, Gavin Newsom. I don't want to hear from you. It's very obnoxious.
Well, guess what? You're going to hear more. And it is very odd that this guy is out there touring the country, essentially campaigning while not campaigning. Why? Why is that?
No, it's a no-brainer. And I'll look like the smartest person on earth. I just need to remember the first time I said it. They're going to pull Biden. It's either going to be a 25th dementia case, which I think would be the easiest one, or maybe nudge him into the 25th by saying, now we're going to find out who really was pissing on hookers in Moscow. And then they're going to, I don't know, find a way to give Kamala Harris a position at the Supreme Court and get Gavin Newsom in there.
That's a trick, is how do you get rid of Kamala if that's the theory?
It
is difficult to get rid of a standing vice president
not
in that mix.
You think there's no dirt on Kamala? I mean, whether or not the dirt on Kamala that I know would probably be likely to exist is sufficiently bad in the broader context. Who knows? But it's easy, or just get her to willingly take another position of power. It's all about stroking ego and just satisfy what would have been with what we'll give you. You'll be on the Supreme Court. You'll be the smartest woman in America, and
that would be horrible.
Can you imagine that? I mean, it
Don't
would
give them that idea.
We did it, Joe. Now we can do something else.
Make
now.
her president. Don't put her on the court.
No, and Kamala Harris is going to look like the smartest woman on the bench because she's going to go teach Ketanji Jackson Brown what a woman is. I can tell you what a woman is. I don't need a biologist. Bam.
Takes 5 seconds.
Who saw Vivek's interview, or at least part one with Tucker?
I saw part of it. I mean, Vivek is very good at speaking almost every time. I have some trust issues with him, but I will say that for being on point, for being a brilliant orator, he's Obama from the right, but probably better than Obama, in my opinion, at just his presentation. Perfect, spot on, very convincing. There were some troubles with the guy, but anyway, those are side things.
I see someone said Vivek is a good bullshitter. It is a little too smooth, but I do tend to prefer the more all over the place manic communicators like myself. He's got the right answer for everything. He says it now, like during that interview, he's right. He's got the right positions on everything, on becoming independent from, like critical minerals, microchips, medicines. I think he's right on his position in the Ukraine. Then it's just a question of, you get into power and then someone sits you down, like Joe Rogan's thought experiment. They sit you down in a room. They show you the third angle of the JFK assassination. They say, you play ball or this ends up being you. And then you don't get to follow through on every one of your wonderful pre-campaign promises.
Or you do the Obama and you reflect everybody's hope and change. Go into office, keep the same Secretary of Defense, keep the same policies that are going, ramp up a few more drone strikes, and call yourself a peacemaker after your Nobel Prize. So there's always that option too, which could be seen as the option of, maybe they're full of shit and they talk very well. But when it comes to actually being a governor or being a president, are they going to do that?
Someone says WEF. Let me just Google that. I'm going to Google and see if Vivek is on. Sorry.
Oh,
yes,
Google is going to be a thing now, isn't it?
Okay, this is part of the issue I have with Vivek. And if he answered it one way, he did a video on Twitter answering this, but WEF featured him and he said, I didn't ask for it. I even sued them to get off of it, which, by the way, is a perfectly reasonable explanation. I'm cool with that. He also got a scholarship, if I recall, from George Soros's brother. And I don't have a problem with that. You know what? If I need to go to college and somebody offers me a scholarship, okay, what's the issue here? The issue that I think came up with Vivek is he paid people to scrape his Wikipedia to remove the references to WEF and to the Soros donation. And then his campaign didn't deny this. They said, oh, we are paying people to correct misspellings of names. Now, again, I don't mind if people do something in their past or they believe something in the past. They could change their mind over time. That's perfectly reasonable. You know, I know that people get into flip-flopping and all that, but people do change their views over time. And if they own their past and they say, yeah, I got a scholarship, I went to go to school, I disavow everything they do, I'm fine with that. But when you start trying to bury things, hide them, or scrub, that bothers me. And that gives me trust issues.
Yeah, it makes you
I don't know how anybody else feels.
No, it makes you, well, more disingenuous, right? Someone who comes out and admits their faults, you know, after considering additional information, I changed my mind is a reasonable approach to take in any given situation. The problem is that they're politicians. They're going to scrub and they're going to do that. And I don't know a way around it other than people just saying we're not going to tolerate it, but who's going to do that? Because then you're going to vote for no one. I don't know. They all do the same stuff.
Fair enough. But as soon as I see him scrubbing it, for whatever reason, his campaign or anything else, everything beautiful he says, everything that resonates with me that he says, I go, well, we'll see. Is he going to scrub that later? Is he going to find a way to scrub these speeches? You know, who am I talking to? Who do I believe?
Okay, no, I agree with you. But again, you know, the problem I have is that's any politician, anyone who's running for the job probably doesn't deserve it. The people like you and I and all of us on the panel that are like, yeah, okay, we're rational people. We had thoughts at one point. We might have changed our minds and we're not going to back down from it. And we're open and honest. We're not necessarily running for office because we don't want the job. We don't want to deal with that. Well, except for Viva, of course.
I'm the only politician that I ever trusted, and Maxime Bernier. But some people tell me Maxime is related to the WEF as well, despite all evidence to the contrary.
Well, I will say, love him or hate him, everybody calls him the most honest liar on the planet. But Trump, is pretty open. Hey, I was at their wedding. Hey, I took all the money. Hey, I did that.
Yeah, that's why everybody loved him.
You
know, that's why everyone loved him. That's why everyone, you know, voted for him in the first place, I think, is because he was so open and honest. But you need another outsider politician like that. And then they're going to be immediately vilified and hated, and everyone's going to focus on them and then try to throw them in jail for nonsense after the fact. So we're going to get essentially more of the same.
As an outsider. That's the tricky part. Vivek is running as an outsider.
Is he?
He's a businessman. No, his template is literally, I'm the Trump that you can introduce to your parents on a date.
You know what?
If you think about it.
Does he run? Has he verbally said that? If he has, he gets my vote already.
Just for that turn of phrase?
I'm writing
Just for that turn of phrase. The Trump that you can introduce to your parents. That's he gets my vote for that.
Okay. Fair enough, but he's not saying it out loud, but that I think is his campaign.
Well, he should say that out loud because that would be a way to co-opt, some of what Trump's got going for him. Yeah, it's a good line.
Yeah, Eric, you should pitch that to him.
That's right.
You should pitch it to his team.
Yep, definitely. That's
like
amazing.
it.
I would vote for him if he came out and said that. No, that if that was his platform, that'd be amazing.
It's genuinely good.
Yeah.
Well, that leads us into, of course, the elephant in the cell, or soon to be. We're on indictment number 864, or whatever it is, for a former president. And Steve, I was talking, we were DMing back and forth. You had mentioned something about Trump and Vicky Weaver and Ruby Ridge, which immediately made me go, what?
Yeah, let's just get it all in there in one big mega conspiracy cake. But it's not quite as exciting as that, but it almost is. And that is, you look at the overall forest and not just the trees, and you know what they're trying to do with Trump, right? Same thing that they were prepared to do with DeSantis, like we will criminalize opposition. That's not to say whether Trump committed a crime or didn't commit a crime, but it is obvious that the campaign against him is ludicrously political, in my opinion. Having said that, talking about the Georgia indictments, what will be interesting to me to see is a legal angle here is whether he rides on Mark Meadows' coattails, who's already filed to remove this to federal court, or does it himself. They were federal officers at the time these things occurred. And so they can ask for this to be removed to federal court. It's a different procedure than in a civil case. Once you're there, you can potentially have immunity. If you were acting within the scope of your authority and it was reasonable objectively and subjectively at the time you were taking the actions to do what you did, then the states cannot prosecute you for that. That's federal supremacy. And that came out in 1890 in a case where an agent guarding a Supreme Court justice shot a guy who attacked the justice, and the Supreme Court ended up saying, well, you can't take him to trial in California because he was acting in his authority as a federal agent. And that was more recently used in the Ruby Ridge case when the FBI sniper who shot Vicki Weaver was charged at state court for that. It was removed to federal court and the case dismissed based on the fact that he was acting within the scope of what his duties were, which is to be a sniper. And as he explained it at that time, it was reasonable for him to do what he did. Whether he was right or not, that's not really the issue, right? It's whether it was a reasonable universe of actions to take. What he did was inside of it. So for me, you know, if you're a Trump fan, you would like to see, and I think if you're a democracy fan, you'd like to see these cases get tested before the trial if there are legal defenses. Because if the case has no merit to begin with, then we don't need the circus. So if Trump is entitled to this federal immunity defense, he should have at it now. They should decide that. And if he's not entitled to it, then we should know it. But I don't know that he will get the benefit of what happened in Idaho with the Ruby Ridge case, because it depends on how the judge wants to construe this. But that's the situation. The federal courts have in the past protected people who were in federal positions who did things that could potentially be or were state crimes from being prosecuted because they were federal employees at the time doing conduct under color of office and within the scope of their duties in a reasonable way. So if Trump was trying to ensure a fair election as the president of the United States, even if he was wrong, if it was reasonable for him to think that he needed to do it at that point, should he have federal immunity? And that would be the silver bullet Trump people want, because it would dispose of the case before the circus continues. And so I'm looking forward to see if he does do that and what comes of it.
Would that be available to him in the New York case as well? I don't remember exactly. There's so many cases. I can't remember which one specifically is the New York one. What are they alleging of?
Yeah, isn't that the one that is about the payment thing? And so if that occurred before he became president, then this wouldn't be available because he wouldn't have been acting as the officer. So I think this is for the Georgia case particularly.
I don't know if I've been not fighting, but engaging too much in discourse with the DeSantis side, who everybody wants to back out. And I say, like, at this point, I'm reading the chat and people don't like, you know, Trump is as crooked as the rest of them. At this point, you're not. What am I listening to here? You're not defending Trump as a person anymore. You're defending a process. And if you think that it ends with Trump, everybody's out there is being a very naive idiot, especially DeSantis. Because if this works with Trump, they're going to indict, said DeSantis, on human trafficking. Period. They'll indict anybody on anything when what they can indict them on are in and of themselves non-criminal acts that as a whole amount to a conspiracy, sending text messages, asking for emails. So I'm getting fed up. Like, people don't understand. You have to defend Trump here, but not Trump as a person. Trump as representing a process, which if they get away with this and the GOP says, okay, well, we better dump Trump now and put freaking Chris Christie on. Chris Christie. I have a friend who's named Greg Christie, and that's why I keep screwing it up. So
Hungry man.
Hey, Greg, how you doing? People have to understand this. You're not defending Trump. You're defending a process, and if you don't defend the process, you're abandoning yourself and the system to this. And they will come for DeSantis if he becomes president. They'll impeach him for human trafficking. It'll be never ending.
And they started with Governor Snyder in Michigan when the attorney general that's currently now charged him criminally with the Flint water issue. If you guys remember the Flint water crisis thing, they charged our former governor criminally with that. Now, eventually the case got dismissed, but I feel like that was a test ground. They're going to see how far they can push this. And they got away with it, right? It was dismissed very quietly. Big sensational when the charges happened. And now, now it's progressing. It's going to Trump and it's going to everyone else. But it started with that. I think that was a hugely political criminal charge, and to see if they can get away with it.
Who
Jeff from Legal Vices has brought up Korea quite a lot, South Korea. and they have that pattern you're warning about, Viva,
Oh,
which
yeah.
is literally the last guy is always convicted. So every time you get a new president, the previous president gets convicted. I think except for the last one or the most
Man,
recent one.
this is sounding better and better.
No, but the thing is this, and it is the balance or the tightrope to walk, because I genuinely believe there's enough evidence of criminality to impeach Biden. There's definitely enough evidence of criminality to charge his son. I don't just say, Hillary Clinton, lock her up. We all know the Clinton Foundation was pay to play. You could call those political crimes where you don't want to make the case for impeach, lock her up. As much as I think Trudeau should be in jail for a number of things, the Trudeau Foundation might not be one of them. It's just institutionalized corruption. But people really aren't thinking this through to the full end of it, where they're saying, yeah, Trump is bad, and just move aside and let the deep state system work. And they'll never do it again, right? Like they won't do an Alex Jones deplatforming to anyone but Alex Jones until they do it to the president. And but it'll stop if you just make nice tweets. And then lo and behold, you make certain donations to certain charities, and then hey, aiding and abetting an insurrection. You're not far off from that at one step away. Or how's that for a histrionic, whoever that is?
No, I think it's perfectly
Aiding
reasonable,
and
people
abetting.
are short-sighted.
Aiding and abetting insurrection. If you donate to a charity, the legal defense, aiding and abetting. So this is about, by the way, I donated to Jenna Ellis's defense, even though some people point out she might be a hypocrite for having, complained about crowdsourcing when Trump was doing it for the legal fees. But I think people are misrepresenting that. Defend Jenna Ellis, because you're not defending an individual, you're defending a process. And if you don't defend the process, well, guess what? They will come for you sooner than later.
Well, isn't it like Dershowitz? And he brought it up in his own video. He defended the literal Yahtzees in Chicago, I believe, or Skokie, or whatever it was.
Muskogee, yeah.
No, not Muskogee. I think it's just like Skokie, Illinois, or whatever. But Dershowitz, very much a Jewish guy, defending Nazis. And as he put it, they're horrible, rotten. If they were hit by a bus tomorrow, he'd be happy. But that's not the point, because he was defending the Constitution. He was defending the law as it should be. And I do think that people, whoever they hate on both sides, should always remember, next time it's your turn. It's like remember the nuclear option?
Yeah.
How many of you remember that? That's my favorite example, because I believe even McCain warned them about it. But was it 2010? They were so pissed off they couldn't get Supreme Court justice through. So they said, oh, hell with this. We're changing the law. We're going with a nuclear option. It's going to be a straight up or down vote. And the Democrats were in charge of Congress. They got their way as a straight up and down vote, and they've eaten 3 candidates since.
Yep. It will always come back and bite you. And yeah, I don't know. But here's my problem with it, though, is I don't know if the Republicans are capable of executing the same sort of thing, charging their criminal or, their opponents criminally, and getting a judge that's going to see it all the way through and things like that. I don't know if they are capable of it. That's my only concern.
Oh, excuse me.
Well, I mean, whether they are or not, that's kind of irrelevant. It's still applying the law.
Well, it is, but I don't know if they'll do it. I talk a lot about, more conservative justices. You'll get unfavorable opinions from conservative justices or judges, as opposed to a more liberal judge, which is going to be more favorable to their side more often, because they kind of ends justify the means, where more conservative justices, you don't see that. No,
that's the thing. It's like, it's not to say that Republicans or the right, conservatives are more moral. It's just like, I don't see them what's the word, implementing the ends justify the means strategies as often as the left does. And
yeah,
I mean,
it's a better way to say it.
It's and the other thing is, I'm not sure that I'd want them to. This is a fight that I think I might have made Michael Malice hate me. Whereas like some people who suggest you have to play by the same, you have to fight as dirty in order to beat them, because otherwise you'll never beat them. And I'm like, if I'm fighting side by side with people who I cannot be convinced will not betray me if they think I'm an ideological adversary, I can't fight side by side them. And so fighting side by side a liberal, politically speaking, you can never do it not in good conscience, but knowing that you would be safe, because they will turn on you the second that you become ideologically adverse to them. And
That's
so
true.
You can't like fight side by side with people who will I don't know, not abide by general rules of ethics, even in battle. But then some people say, Viva, you're a sissy Canadian. There are no rules in war, and that's it.
Ian, I think you were saying something a minute ago. And
Oh, I've forgotten. It was probably just being snarky.
oh, that would be the fun part. But anyway, David, I go back and forth on that about the tactically speaking, whether you use the same tactics or you don't, or you address them, because there is the argument to be made. And believe me, I have a show partner, Mark, who very happily let you know, because he's a former Democrat. His grandfather was a campaign manager for a mayor of New York. So he knows all the tactics. And you can say, you know what, I'm too honorable to ever do anything, and watch them just march away and take everything away from you too. So there has to be some degree of a balance, or you have to find a way to fight that is equally effective or devastating. If it is a war, it has to be total war. You can't just say, I'm going to do selective strikes and hope for the best. Either you're defeating them or you're not. And I get it, because there is a repugnancy aspect of, hey, I'm not a disgusting pig. You know, if you get with pigs, you're going to be covered with mud too, because pigs like it. But if the pigs take over your property, then you're screwed forever.
Well, I think that's what Trump found that way. Trump found the way to be above board and honest about everything, but doing it in such a sensational way that it grabbed people's attention, and he wasn't just kind of shoved aside, especially during his first campaign. But you kind of need to recreate that. And that's why I said with, what's his name? Vivek, right? If he said that I'm the Trump that you could bring home to your family, you kind of make that same argument and still have that same effect, right? But it's the same kind of tactic. You could be above board and honest about everything, but you could still take me home to your parents. I like that approach, but I think that's what you need to do.
Well, I just had a thought in there, and I forgot what it was now. There was a super chat convicted. What if Trump gets convicted, Eric? I think it was a $10.
Yeah, could he be pardoned?
Well, so there's two things. I mean, I was having
Not on state charges.
Right.
Not on state charges. He could, first of all, he could be president from jail. It's not. I mean, he could run from jail. He can win in jail, and he can. I don't know how he could preside in jail. Maybe they'd have to have like some sort of temporary release where he can get out to do his job, and then put him back in jail after he's president. But yeah, Stacey Abrams had better. You know, it's an amazing thing. It's the wholesale double standard. Lawlessness. It's not two standards of law. It's lawlessness, where Stacey Abrams can scream until she's blue in the face, stolen election, I won, it's all fraud. But she didn't put any of those words into a RICO conspiracy to overturn the election, and overturning the election was a legal theory where you present alternate slate of electors based on the fraud that you believe occurred.
By the way, we got a family tradition there too. Let's close that up a little bit. The prosecutor, Willis, who's her father? Oh, a Black Panther. Who did the Black Panthers run with? The Weather Underground. I mean, there's some really dark stuff in here, and these are the hardball tactics using lawfare. They've moved on since, previously where they like to use bombs, but these are not mild-mannered operators. Again, they are into total war. They are into total lawfare. Look at everything that's going on. They're not selectively charging, David. They're attacking every possible way you can. Jack Smith, how many times have we read the word novel when it's come to the Trump charges? Am I the only one who's noticed that they keep saying,
no, it's a novel legal theory. A novel legal theory.
Yeah, what does novel mean? We're making this shit up as we go.
No, but it's so they're trying a novel theory to prosecute a former president and the front runner for the next election, and then calling Putin a corrupt autocrat because he's locking up his ideological adversaries and journalists. I mean, it's crazy. I didn't know about the underground, the Weather Underground and Black Panther connection. But
yeah, Bill Ayers. Okay, if you just look it up. Barack Obama, Bill Ayers, Weather Underground, Bernadette Dorn, and Bill Ayers wrote Obama's book. He's the ghostwriter for Obama's book. Yeah, go look it up. Anyway, and, Weather Underground, fun organization. Bill Ayers, where's he? I think he's a professor in Chicago right now. Where's Obama from? They're all tied together, dude. It is dark. When you start reading about the bombings that took place in the early 70s, Weather Underground were the top operators doing that. They split out of the SDS, which I believe was the Student Democratic Society, which was a socialist organization. The hardcore action wing became the Weather Underground, or the Weathermen, if you will. It's all coming around. 1968, folks. It's happening again. Coincidentally, with another RFK even running for president.
Yeah, that's going to be the interesting part. RFK's been not quiet, but he hasn't been getting much attention for the last few weeks. It's been Vivek's turn now, but I don't know. I'm going to stop engaging with the Team DeSantis because it's like this fighting is really it's not productive. In as much as I'm noticing former or purported members of the PPC thinking they're needling me or scoring points on Twitter, the infighting I think is exactly the COINTELPRO type strife that it's a fringe benefit from the novel prosecutions. Get infighting, get Chris Christie on frickin' Jake Tapper saying how Trump has to drop out because you can't seriously be running for president. He's facing so many charges. I believe now Chris Christie's a Democrat, or at least part of the deep state.
He's a New
Well, there's
Jersey
definitely
Republican.
He's definitely members of the deep state for sure, and maybe even DeSantis. I don't think he's as above board as he claims to be.
I know what some people have said about DeSantis. I like DeSantis. I don't think he's ready for president.
He's got some deep state vibes about him. I believe he was prosecuting in Gitmo. I would be very interested in his intelligence background, his foreign policy as a congressman. Barnes has brought up a bunch.
These are legitimate points. At the end of first of all, this is another thing people don't understand. No candidate's going to be perfect, and at the end of the day, you can also only play within the realm of the what was the word I just used? Candidates that you have. So okay, fine.
Sure.
So everyone's like, well, Trump is terrible. He's okay. Who do you pick then? If not, you only can pick from Vivek, Christie, Trump, DeSantis. Okay, so you go with DeSantis, and I say DeSantis is A, not ready, and B, will be indicted on human trafficking if he makes the ticket.
You really think so? I'm curious.
I absolutely.
I haven't heard this.
There was an article. Hold on one second. Texas sheriff charging human trafficking. I don't know who they're.
Wouldn't that be Abbott? I thought Abbott was the guy who was shipping people to New York.
But it doesn't matter who it is. They made the comment at the time that it's human trafficking.
Oh, I was wondering what the human trafficking was. It's for the
Martha's Vineyard thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And then people are like, they'd have to go after Biden. No, they wouldn't, because they haven't gone after Biden for anything they've gone after Trump for. So no, they're just he did human trafficking and Biden did migrant humanitarian displacement.
How is that human trafficking?
Right.
It's the I don't know, the loose interpretation that you are through deceit or fraud misrepresenting and getting people to be confined unwillingly because if they knew where they were going they wouldn't be there, that you're trafficking them without their consent. Some of them are minors and they didn't sign the proper papers.
So you're saying they're just framing it as a crime, so it's like the kids in cages thing versus the way that they phrased it for Obama.
Oh well, no, because Biden was literally flying underage kids across the country in the dead of the night. That's not nobody talks about human trafficking there. But when DeSantis pulls his gag, they're dropping the term human trafficking. They indicted Trump on nothing. If DeSantis thinks that this is not going to come back up to him. And if it doesn't, then I would be a little suspicious.
But I don't think that DeSantis is a strong enough opponent. I don't think that he's as threatening as Trump is. And so I feel like, maybe if I see what you're saying, like if he gets there, that they might push it in that direction. But I don't think he's ready either. And I don't see a lot of people gunning for him to get into office.
No, and Vivek, he's
not going to make it.
He talks nice. He's 37 years old. He might make a good VP, and you can ensure that you have 8-year legacy there. I still like Carrie Lake, though.
Well, let's go and close out with another favorite figure since we're on Trump. How about the guy who played him on Saturday Night Live? Ian.
I was waiting for this.
Something's happening. There's some movement possibly. What's up, Ian?
So they withdrew the charges against Baldwin without prejudice on the basis of, hey, maybe the gun was malfunctioning. We need another report. And so
FBI
now
is dumb.
What's that?
FBI, they're incompetent. Can't trust their reports.
Well, now they've got another report, and this report basically says we took the broken gun from the FBI, we replaced the parts, we tested it, it doesn't fire without pulling the trigger. So this is basically the report they've been looking for in order to reactivate the charges. Now, I don't know that they're going to be able to get a conviction out of it, but I can see why they'd want to try. In fact, I kind of want them to try because I think that the gun safety issues on this are so egregious that it's worth pushing. But there are some issues on it. One of them is this gun was so badly fouled. And part of the reason why it's fouled like this is that blanks are dirty and blanks don't... the bullet actually traveling through the barrel partially scrapes it out. So you don't get that effect when you're just shooting blanks. But still, it was so badly fouled that they couldn't make out rifling marks other than to tell the direction of twist of the rifling marks. And it actually compressed the bullet and reduced its diameter by traveling through all of that, gunk on the outside of it, which is just like, this thing had to have not been cleaned for a long time. This is a lot of buildup and crap.
Which is odd because it was a brand new gun. I mean, I have that on pretty good authority from the manufacturer to the film set, which really, that's a lot of blanks.
I think it got, maybe they're just using really dirty ammo, but I think this thing had to have gotten shot quite a bit. And if I'm Baldwin's team, what I'm doing is I'm pointing to that saying, first of all, they fixed it. So of course it works fine. That's one argument you're going to make. And then this guy's going to come up and say, oh, well, the repairs we did weren't the kind that would have fixed the problem that you see. And the jury's going to get lost in that. What they're going to hear is they fixed the gun. So yeah, it works now. He's going to be able to say, listen, it was in poor maintenance. It wasn't getting cleaned regularly. It was all gunked up. So therefore, that's also an issue because how do we know it was working fine? They replaced parts. Those parts wouldn't have been gunked up. They wouldn't have been messed up, all of that. How do you know that other parts weren't filed or whatever else? There's lots of places where they can make arguments on this, but what this report does is it gives them the legs under them to say, listen, we now have a report that says that the trigger had to have been pulled. It includes pictures.
another report, Ian, another report, because FBI are not known for, they're known for incompetence in some ways, but not typically in their forensic labs. So the FBI already said, we took it to such a degree, we tested every which way but sideways, had to pull the trigger. We even forced the issue and broke the gun trying to prove, see if there was an alternate way. So it's, it doesn't even make sense, some of this.
Well, and this one also includes pictures of Baldwin on the, on the fatal day. And you can see his finger in the trigger, on the trigger or in the trigger guard, because, if it wasn't YouTube, I'd actually go I've got the same model. So I'll just use my glasses, but you can see his finger is obstructed by the trigger guard. There's that band of metal that's blocking it. So his finger is clearly inside the trigger guard.
I have that video clip.
And
I don't have it near. But...
It's so egregious, right? It's so, the problem is that nobody on that set seems to have been taking safety all that seriously. But one other thing that I think is really interesting is that it seems to really say that Seth Kinney is these bullets didn't come from him because they're definitely different bullets. We still don't know where the live rounds come from, although I'm starting to develop a theory. And
I've had one for a while. I won't say it out loud, but yes.
Well, my pet theory at this point is that I'm wondering if they just didn't have enough dummies and somebody brought live ammo to say, well, we'll stuff it into places where it's not getting fired, like on a bandolier or something like that, where it's just going to be decorative. And if that's the case, then that's terrible. But I don't
I've
know.
never heard that theory. That's a
somebody-
frightening theory.
As somebody who
I
knows
mean,
nothing
it's-
about guns and ammo, are dummy rounds more expensive or harder to get than live rounds?
Dummy rounds require some work. You can buy live cartridges just off the shelf, but getting dummies, and I actually have, these are film dummies from a production company. They typically are handmade. And so you can see there's a bunch of differences on them. In this case, you can see that the primer is not present. So it's just an empty primer pocket. The other thing that is critical is, hopefully you can hear that, the rattle. And there's no powder in this thing. And the reason why it rattles is they actually put a steel ball bearing or BB in there. And this is also a theory as to, like, what's the guy who pled out on that one? I forget his name right now. Yes. He said that he checked it by shaking. And my theory on that is that he shook the gun as opposed to shaking each individual cartridge because he thought it was faster. And so he shakes the gun and hears a rattle. The problem is you have to do that with each individual cartridge, because if you've got 5 that rattle and 1 that doesn't, that gun is going to kill somebody. So
he also only looked at 3 rounds. Because of that gun, you have to spin in the chamber and show, and she did 1, 2, 3, and I think he was too busy or whatever it was. He admits it that he only saw 3, and maybe she had shaken it too, but that's significant too, because he would have seen the primer taken out, which is another great way to tell. If you look in the back, there's no primer. That's very much a dummy.
Well, considering how many steps they skipped, and you know, that would not surprise me. That's a good theory.
There were safety violations everywhere.
Yep.
Like every single safety rule they were violating or skipping. And it's just like, I've spoken to armorers, and they're just, every aspect of it horrifies them. So, and I mean, some people are like, why should Hannah Gutierrez Reed be facing jail when Baldwin pulled the trigger? I'm like, she should definitely be facing jail. The stuff that happened on that set is horrifying. But also Baldwin, like, his actions are themselves like a tremendous violation of all of the rules of safety.
But they're a violation of the rules of safety. Do they rise to the level of gross negligence for criminal culpability? Or are they just at a negligent level?
I think that they do. You've got him in the safety meetings. Apparently, they were unable to complete the safety meetings because he was talking on his phone instead of actually paying attention at the safety meetings. He has his finger on the trigger. He's got this gun pointed at somebody, and he says he never pulled the trigger. I don't believe that for a second, because he also says that he was fanning. And you know what you have to do to fan a revolver like that?
Pull the trigger back.
You got to hold the trigger down.
I don't remember him saying he fanned ever. I don't
he said that he was practicing fanning as part of, like, the movie. And the other thing is, like,
that was in his police interview, I believe.
Yeah. I went out and bought the same model of gun just so I could try it and see. Like, it's literally the Pieta. It's the same make and model. It is the finish is a little different, but it's the same gun.
It's the standard in the industry.
Pieta makes great guns. And I can tell you, just playing with it, it was really easy to, like, if you put your finger in the trigger guard and you pull the hammer back, it's really easy to pull that trigger. The trigger on them is, as is common with these, with the double action revolvers, it's really common that they've got a very light trigger. And all of your hand is kind of wired together. If you do, like, if you're pulling back with your thumb, your finger tends to curve and you may not even notice it. This is why gun owners get really particular about where your finger is when, like, your finger can't be on the trigger because of these things. Oh, sorry, single action. I had a brain fart there. It's just, you don't really realize how much your fingers move outside of your direct thought. And this is stuff that should have been hammered into him in this lesson, but he wasn't paying attention. This, like, the whole thing of, I pointed a gun at somebody and I thought it was empty, but I pulled the trigger. I can tell you where I am, you would get a conviction on that every day of the week and twice on Sunday for I pulled the trigger, pointing this gun at somebody. I thought it was empty. I thought it was fine. Like that.
I just don't like the idea of treating, and I know for the purposes of if you handle firearms, I handle firearms all the time. You treat it always as it's loaded. You don't point it at anybody. Fingers not on the trigger unless you're ready to shoot. All those rules are fine when you're handling firearms. What I don't like is the idea that we're going to treat firearms as a special category for the purposes of criminal culpability. Because, the question really is did his actions, you talked about, when you're squeezing or pulling the trigger back, your fingers tend to move. That all sounds like negligence, not necessarily gross negligence to me.
By the way, the enhancement charge has already been removed, Dave.
Yeah.
So the added factor of the firearms has already been taken away from both of them.
Yeah,
Neither one are being charged with the gun enhancement.
No preferential treatment there. That's because the enhancement wasn't in force at the
Correct.
time of the incident.
Yeah.
So there's no special treatment
Yeah.
there. Did everybody ever hear the urban legend of the guys who were coming back from a hunting trip and their headlights went out and they took a shotgun shell and they realized it looked like the exact same size as the fuse in the headlight, and they put it in the headlight and then it overheated and discharged and shot them both in the groin while they were driving?
Yes.
Wouldn't happen.
Okay,
Yeah,
I was gonna share that. I just Googled it and then I found out it's an actual urban legend. It was wrongly attributed in the Darwin Awards because they blew their junk off.
I can tell you for that, if you took a shotgun shell, and they actually make like little tripwire devices that you can use this. If I set one right next to my webcam, aimed it at my face and pulled the trigger, I might end up with some real annoyance in my eyes, but it wouldn't kill me. If I kept my eyes closed or if I put safety glasses on,
because
it wouldn't kill me.
it needs the
It needs
condensing
the barrel.
It needs the
It
barrel.
needs because the barrel forces everything through that tube, whereas otherwise it goes in every direction, and so it's a real big difference in the force. There's actually videos. I think it was Taufledermaus who did a video testing that, and they couldn't get it to do any damage.
I feel
I had
like
a quick question for
Mythbusters threw bullets in a fire once.
Yes, and actually this has been tested not just by Mythbusters, but also by firefighters organization. They tested all sorts of things, and they found that a loaded gun in a fire is dangerous because that will fire and travel. But just boxes of ammunition in a fire are completely safe to firefighters. They will not be able to cause any sort of damage through the suits that they wear. In fact, it really couldn't cause damage even without a suit. The other thing that really imperils firefighters is cans of food. That can of soup that you've got, if that thing goes boom in a fire, you don't want to be standing next to it. But just ammo.
We need to outlaw cans of soup. Too dangerous.
Yeah.
What were you going to say, Chandler?
I was going to ask, I wanted to go back to what David was saying about I'd like to know the difference, just if you could eliminate the non-lawyers here, between negligence and gross negligence.
You're not asking me, are you?
Oh, you're asking
lawyer.
me?
No, I
MLS.
never practiced criminal law. I wouldn't be able to flesh out the.
I was
the
asking
nuance.
MLS since he had brought it up originally. Sorry, I'm between two Davids. I'm in a David sandwich, but MLS had mentioned gross negligence versus regular negligence. So
It's
let's
like that which deviates from the normal conduct of a rational human. Dave, is that close enough?
Yeah, essentially, it's like it's conduct so reckless that it kind of I don't even know the definition of it offhand.
Would it be hold my beer?
No, it's like people are dumb, but not that dumb. Like you should have known not to be
It's
that
conduct
dumb.
that's so reckless that any reasonable person would consider it like dangerous or something like
I
that.
mean, I guess
can't
I was
remember.
asking for
This
the
is a
legal
good one.
definition for the ambitious.
How about this one, Dave? This chat. Wanton lack of care.
Wanton lack of care. That sounds good.
Wanton
It's like-
I'm gonna actually look it
disregard.
up.
People drive negligently all the time. Like if you forget to use your signal, that could be negligent. But in terms of the you're talking about things like, hey, I was doing a stunt on the road. Like I wanted to see just how fast my car could go.
Okay.
On an occupied, street, or I was doing a YouTube video and I thought I wanted to, see if I could get the high score on this, your speed is sign through a school zone, or I had my buddy riding on top of the car, holding on to the side, and we were going over speed bumps as fast as we could.
I've done
And
that.
I
That's
made
actually, that's
So
actually
this
fun.
This is the criminal jury instruction, at least for the state of Michigan. Gross negligent means more than carelessness. It means willful disregard to the results of the results to others that might follow from the act or failure to act. In order to find the defendant was grossly negligent, you must find the following. First, that the defendant knew the danger to others. That is, he knew there was a situation that required him to take ordinary care to avoid injury to another. Second, that the defendant could have avoided injury or injuring another by using ordinary care. And third, that the defendant failed to use ordinary care to prevent injuring another when, to a reasonable person, it must have been apparent that the result was likely to be serious injury. So that's the actual legal definition of gross negligence.
I was just trying to remember I took an undergraduate criminal law class, and I remembered something about, being aware of grievous bodily harm, but in the California definition, but I didn't know if that was.
So going back to Runkle's example, like if you're just failing to use your turn signal or you're driving 5 miles over the speed limit, that's kind of careless, right? But if you are street racing, right, through intersections where it's clearly a red light, you kind of meet that gross negligence standard because you recognize.
Where does reckless come in?
Recklessness comes in
for knowledge, I think.
Yeah, for knowledge. You know that it's reckless conduct. You find the defendant was gross. Let's see. It means willful disregard of the results to the others. So recklessness actually, I think, escalates it beyond gross negligence.
Okay.
So you were saying about Baldwin.
I'm thinking more second-degree murder kind of thing. Sorry.
Mm-hmm. You were saying about Baldwin, like, you didn't know if it meant gross negligence.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yeah. And so right now, under the standard that I'm looking at, is Baldwin grossly negligent, which means more than carelessness.
But less than reckless.
He has a safety meeting because he knows that the guns on set are dangerous. He blows off paying attention to in that safety meeting to the extent that the safety meeting is that the safety lessons are unable to continue. That's a problem right at the outset.
And it must be apparent that the result was likely for serious injury. So,
also 20 years of handling, or over 20 years of handling weaponry in multiple movies. He's very clear about his long expertise, in which I'm sure that others can do that.
Well, the problem is that he's not like. At times he says, I'm a complete idiot. I don't know what's going on. And then the instant he thinks he can impress those two cops, he's like, I've been shooting for years on every movie set. Let me
This
tell
is how
you
a blank works. Here's a rummy. Here's a master class in how ammo is in a movie.
Yeah. So he can't actually make his decision, which means that the prosecution gets to hit him both ways. A, you're an idiot. You should have paid attention in your safety classes. And B, you're an expert. You should know better. And which is just like, don't talk to the cops and don't talk to the media. I actually thought that was really interesting because when the report says the sources they looked at, they actually cite his George Stephanopoulos interview as one of the sources they looked at.
It's amazing how much he talked. I mean, it's amazing, the degree and level of, of arrogance. Just read the room, my friend. You were just responsible for the death of a person in one way or another. Now is not the time to brag about your shooting ability. It's like, it looks especially bad that you didn't know, that you didn't pay attention. I have a really big concern with the fact that, he doesn't pay attention in these safety meetings and they can just go on and do whatever. I mean, there's no requirement to take a sort of a test or, show knowledge or awareness. I mean, there should be more. There should be much, much more in terms of standards for how you move forward. And I hope that it changes because
several armorers I talked to said basically if somebody doesn't pay attention in a safety meeting, they don't get a gun.
Well,
unless they're Alec Baldwin.
I've heard, I can't give any of the details, but one armorer basically said that they forced a character to get redesigned because the actor was not being sufficiently careful with the prop guns. And they said, basically, here's the deal. You either get a new armor or this guy doesn't get a gun. And so that character was rewritten from a gunslinger to a knife using character because it was like, all right, the armorers put their foot down. This guy's got a knife and that's all he's got because the armor won't give him a gun. And I think that needs to be the standard, right?
Well, yeah, no,
I
that's
agree.
kind of what I was getting at too. Like, how is it that he was handed a gun if he was constantly on the phone during the safety meetings in the first place? And I think that's
Yeah.
where the other charges might be appropriate.
Inexperienced armorer, a very inexperienced armorer who is easily bullied, had 2 jobs. I mean, it's ripe with problems.
And
Are you going to
also-
tell the A-list producer if she doesn't have the gravitas and experience? And by the way, it's nothing to do with her gender or sex. It has
No,
to do
but
with
she's young.
inexperience.
Yeah.
Right, a male, that was young, inexperienced, and barely second film, ever in that role. Oh my God, the stars. Yeah.
Well, and a
So
lot
can I
of
just say this is
Oh,
why
wait.
you don't talk to the police? Because let's assume
Yes.
Alec Baldwin did not do an interview and did not say, "Oh, I'm so
He'd be
experienced
fine.
with guns and I got all this stuff." The very
Yeah.
first element in this, at least if we're using this definition, is that the defendant knew of the danger to another, and he knew that it was a situation that required him to take ordinary care to avoid the injury. Now, if he didn't say to the police, "Hey, I know all about guns. I'm so experienced in it," and we have an armorer that failed to properly instruct, he might have gotten away just on the first element alone.
Yeah,
Like
I think he
talked.
would have been, as the prosecution, his interviews would have taken me from the, I think it's a bridge too far to be able to get to the conviction to, we have a case here. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to win, but he gave them a case that they could argue.
He really
Yeah.
did.
And it's terrible. And I'm not a film armorer. Like, I don't do any of this for a living. But I can say I've had people, including lawyers who are like 30 years my senior, who say like, "Hey, can you take me out to the range and I want to try shooting because I need to know this stuff." And I have taken, like, there's a particular person I won't name, but a respected lawyer. I took him out to the range. I was walking him through the safety thing and I said, "Okay. And now we're going home." And he's like, "But I'm here to shoot." And I'm like, "Yeah, you were not paying attention when I was running through those safety rules. We're done. We're going home. You are not touching a gun today." And he was pissed. But at the end of the day, if the guy isn't paying attention, I'm not putting a gun in his hand. And that's the thing. And that's, a lot of armorers are ex-military. And I think that that's actually helpful because it helps
Yes.
give them that perspective of, and the confidence that when there's some, like, I make, however many millions of dollars. Do you know how many millions of dollars it's costing to not film this today? He's like, that sounds like a you problem. Like, that confidence is necessary in an armorer.
You're right on that, Ian and Steve. I think you'll back this up. I don't know if you've gone through this, but I have too. When you have one round, not even a round itself, but just one spent shell missing on a range in the Army, everything is shut down. I mean, they shut the entire thing down, and you have people walking side by side looking just for that one piece of brass, and it can go on for hours. Nobody goes anywhere. It is so serious on the safety requirements, it will blow your mind. Am I exaggerating, Steve?
And no, I think in the regular Army, that's generally true. I have seen it be different. But I want to say here, I stand behind Alec Baldwin when it comes to gun issues.
I know
not
where
in
this is
front of
going.
him.
Not in front of him. Everybody saw that coming.
I just pulled up.
It's been out there. All right, well, let's wrap up with one last story. Try to keep this before too long. Has anybody been covering the blind side conservatorship case?
Yes. That one's fascinating just because I suspect it's a whole lot of hurt feelings and a whole lot of misunderstanding. One of the big things on that one. So Mr. Orr is suing because he says he thought he was adopted, and you can see why he would think that, because that's actually like on their webpage that he's their adopted kid. But instead, he's under a conservatorship, and that conservatorship is really onerous. It says he can't enter into contracts without the permission of his conservators, which is ridiculous at his age, right? It's obvious that this conservatorship should end. But beyond that, he also wants an accounting. He wants money. And one of the big things he wants money for is the movie itself. And he thinks that there's millions of dollars because he says that this thing has made $330 million and they get a cut. And here's where he goes really wrong on assuming that there's a whole bunch of money, because they get I think it's 2.5% cut off the net of this.
Hollywood accounting, baby.
Hollywood
Welcome to it.
accounting, the net is going to be like $8. So, like he thinks there's millions of dollars, but they signed a net deal instead of a gross deal. It could have been 50%, and there still wouldn't be any money off the net. So I think he thinks he's being cheated out of millions of dollars, and that millions of dollars probably doesn't exist. But ultimately, at the end of the day, you've got real hurt feelings because he thinks he should have been adopted, and it's going to be a real drag-out fight, I think, just because family law has some of the worst fights out there, and this is really a family fight at the end of the day. It's going to get mean.
Isn't there weirdness to this too, in the sense, correct me if I'm wrong, it's not a case where they were flat on their ass broke and they did a conservatorship and they're making money off of him. The family themselves are worth over $100 million, more money than he ever would be. They were always super wealthy, even when they gave the conservatorship. So there's not that financial incentive necessarily obviously there, from what I understand.
You can see like $1 million families who go and steal like hundreds of millions of dollars, families who steal like another 100,000. Like sometimes that kind of, stuff happens. But surprisingly, what you don't see in the allegations is things like they took my football money, which is what you'd really expect if this was a really, like, if you were abusing the hell out of the conservatorship, you'd be going after his football money. But there's no indication that they did that. So I don't see this as like the really abusive scenario.
I'm going to play devil's advocate further on that. And from what I understand, he comes from a really bad background. Okay. Crackhead, all kinds of terrible things, drugs and whatnot. Is it possible that a conservatorship prevented him, if maybe he wasn't mature enough? How many times have we read about athletes who get their NFL contracts or whatever, and they go out and they make it rain and they lose all their money and everything else? Is it possible that that could have been in place to protect him? Now, I'm not saying it's right or wrong, but the intention, could that
Except
be
they
possible?
never actually did any of that. Like, there's no indication that they stepped in to say, like, you can't buy this fancy car. And if we're going to do that, we should do that with every new military recruit, because like new military recruit thing of like, I have a new car and a new wife who I met at the strip club is like, it's a common joke within the military, but it destroys people's financial futures. They spend their initial money on a car that they can't afford. But there's no indication that they said, like, you can't make it rain at the club. You can't buy that big house. You can't buy that big car. You can't any of that. He might have run through his money. That is a possibility, that he's sitting there going, I need money because I'm getting to the end of what I've got. But there's no indication.
What about this comment, Ian? What about this?
Yeah, that was one argument that the family made, was like that we wanted to use the conservatorship because Ole Miss, basically they have priority, and they said, like, you can't just use this on any kid. He's got to be actually in your family. So they're like, the conservatorship establishes the family role.
But if the conservatorship is limited, I don't know if there was actually any limit on it. But I mean, it's weird that they granted one, even though he's 18. He didn't need to be adopted because he's 18. He could just live there in theory.
Well, and the other weird thing is that they said that they didn't think adult adoption was a thing, but they had a lawyer on this, and I'm like, how do you have a lawyer on this who doesn't think adult adoption is a thing? That was literally like a 2-minute Google search. Like, when, like, do they have adult adoption, and when did that come into place? But the other thing is, this lawyer starts looking more and more weird, because this lawyer does everything. She's there for the family issue of the conservatorship. So that's, step one. She's also counsel of the counsel for the foundation, which is also strange. She also appears to have been counsel negotiating some of these deals. And I'm like, so she does entertainment law, she does family law, she does foundation stuff.
Just none of it very well.
What does she not do? And why, in God's name, when she's doing this conservatorship, like, if I did family law and you asked me to do this conservatorship, the first thing I'm doing is calling up friends from law school and going, I need somebody to be an independent legal advice on this. And we might be friends, but like, you need to represent this kid. And I want their name on every piece of paperwork on this conservatorship to cover my ass. I would not want to proceed without independent legal advice for Orr. But that doesn't appear to have happened. And I'm like, why would you do that? So I actually think the lawyers should be getting a little worried on this one.
Yeah, I think the point, it's interesting because I've been looking at all the news coverage about this story. We're talking about the Michael Orr story. All the news coverage has been saying you can't adopt an adult. And I'm like, that's like first year law school. There were I call them the adoption cases. So for people who don't know, before you had gay marriage, to get those type of protections to have the family relationship, you had to adopt your spouse. And then you get these cases where people are like, we want to get out of this adoption. You know, I don't want this person to be my spouse anymore, but it's kind of like, you know, how do you end an adoption? So you had there's a whole series of case law on adults trying to get out of adult adoptions. So the whole claim that you couldn't adopt an adult and you had to do a conservatorship just brings a whole bunch of red flags to me. Like, if their lawyer is saying this, then that means either that lawyer is being deceptive or that lawyer may have a malpractice suit, because adult adoptions, just look, all you have to do is just Google the statute. The statute literally says you can adopt children or adults. It's like, you know, that's, but again, you know, it all depends on.
I think you could even do that in common law. You didn't even need a statute for that most times, at least in Michigan. I know we have a common law thing about adult adoptions, but now it's been superseded by statute. I mean, it's existed forever.
Yeah. I mean, in theory, I could adopt like Hunter Biden, which would be a terrible decision because he's a terrible, like, but, you know, there's all, how could they not, like, that claim of we didn't know adult adoption was a thing is just crazy. And the other thing is that if you didn't know that, the next step would be to say, you know what, we effed up. We meant for him to be part of our family. We meant to adopt him. Because they've said, we still love him, we still stand by him. So I'm wondering if we're going to see a filing saying, we're offering an adult adoption now. Like, we agree the conservatorship is ridiculous. Let's adopt him. The thing is that if they do that, then their two biological kids suddenly are maybe looking at less inheritance and so forth. And
you get a third. Yeah, you're not at a third. But it's crazy because they were going around for all this time saying that he was adopted. And I think they signed the conservatorship because they still wanted to have that. Because don't forget, they were essentially boosters for the school. They were boosters for the school that they were going to, Ole Miss. And what a booster is that somebody helps promote the athletic program. So you sell tickets, you try to recruit people. And essentially, they recruited this kid to go to Ole Miss, and if you're a first round draft pick in the NFL, whatever school you go to, you're going to free ride everywhere. That's like highly big position, especially for an offensive lineman. So, you know, it just, this whole thing, the whole fact that of the Ole Miss situation, the boosters, the fact that they didn't adopt him and they essentially had a lawyer tell him that there was no such thing as adult adoptions, where in Tennessee there are 100% adult adoptions. I just don't know what you do.
Right now,
everybody, I just want to say I got to duck out. Thank you all. Enjoy the weekend, people.
Take care,
people. Weekend.
Take care.
Right now on their webpage, it says, you know, Michael, the adopted son of Sean and Leanne Toohey. Literally, like, I'm looking at it right this second, and it's like, yeah.
But how do you guys feel about the other side though? Because don't forget, he was also saying that he didn't get any money from the movie deal, but then they say we have a check that we paid him $100,000.
I want to see the check.
That's it's. The lawyer, but would a lawyer
What's
come out?
What's interesting is they said they split it amongst all of them. Their two children and what's his name? Estimated $100,000 apiece. Why is it that the other two children got a cut of the proceeds from the movie? Were they? I never saw the movie. Were they like part of the movie? I mean, was it their whole story or just him?
It was his story, but they were tangentially a part of it. I don't know, because it's like the story is so weird because on one end, like the father just sold his company for $200 million, right? So why would he be trying to take $100,000 or $200,000 from this kid? It doesn't make sense. But then on the other side, it's like, but you're telling them that you're adopting him, but you're not able to adopt him. So what the hell's up with that? It just there's so much on both sides where you just don't know what the hell's going on. But right now, I tend to believe Michael Orr may have been screwed in this situation, but I still need more facts because that's very tentative.
And the super chat that we just had up there was wrong because it says that the order was only valid till age 25. The order says that it's valid until it's canceled. So he's still under the conservatorship until the court cancels it.
Yeah, think Britney Spears.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
How's
And that's
that going,
sadly
by the
all
way?
too common. A lot of these orders are put in place just like forever. And one of the reforms that's been suggested is automatic expiries, such that it's like this order lasts for at most 2 years. And if you want it to continue after 2 years, you got to bring another application. Now that's a pain in the that's a pain if you've got people whose conditions are never going to get better. So it's tough. And I'm seeing people saying that they canceled it. I'm just
I think that was the motion that was filed was to cancel it.
Yeah, I think they but the Tuies have kind of said, hey, we're good. We don't want the. And to be fair to the Tuies on that end too, they didn't use it for his like NFL money because they could have theoretically done it for the NFL money and for all this other stuff, and they didn't. They just did it for this one thing. So it's kind of like, so it's kind of like what was even a point of the conservatorship too. So it's just very messy. I just don't know. But if you just look at what's been laid out, one side is saying, that we couldn't adopt them, but they could. The other side is saying we didn't get any money, but it seems like they did. So both sides, just kind of leave your hands up in the air and say, who really knows?
On that. They're saying it says till 25 unless ordered by this court.
I'm going to pull it up.
In Michigan, I'll just say, in Michigan generally, we have certain types of conservatorships. Most of them, you have to renew them every 5 years. You have to do annual reportings and things like that. But every 5 years, the court has to all right, where are we? Everyone come in. Let's see if this is still needed going forward. So it might have been something similar to that. And they went in and they're like, yeah, we're going to keep this going because now we got the blind side in the movie deal, whatever. I don't know. And they just kept it going, for another 5 years.
I know if you guys ever did elder abuse, like I've had a couple of elder abuse cases. And when you do elder abuse, this happens a lot. Where somebody will come in, say they're helping a person, take out a guardianship or a conservatorship, and then essentially pay themselves, pay their family, and pay everybody and fleece the person dry. So these conservatorships are really, really dangerous in the wrong hands.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Yeah, there is no expiry date specified in the ordered portion. However, I'll just share it here if I can.
It might be an action of statute that says that.
Well, the thing is that they're bringing a consent order to terminate it this week. So it notes, it further appears to this court that its owner's desire that the petitioners be recognized as his conservators until terminated by an order of this court. So it looks like it just lasts until
court order.
Until otherwise. There is a provision in the statute that says that they're supposed to bring basically a document to say why it's still supposed to continue. And they're also supposed to be doing a yearly accounting, and they haven't been doing either of those things. So that, or at least according to Orr's petition. So we haven't seen the response filing yet, but yeah, it looks like it's intended to be permanent until ended. So,
and then not filing the accounting is not terribly uncommon, especially when you get family members as conservators. We're like, oh, I was supposed to file the accounting, and then it becomes a giant mess when they finally do contact an attorney and do it, and you got to go back through 5 years of history of accounts.
Well, and they may especially have not felt the need to file an accounting if if they just weren't touching his money, right? If there wasn't any involvement with his money, it's like, okay, the accounting is a big zero. He has all his money. That's it, which is actually violating the order because he's not allowed to, like, technically, according to this order, he can't get a cell phone on his own.
But then how does that affect all his other contracts? Because don't forget, he's signing multi-million-dollar contract with the NFL for 9 and 10 years, right? Technically, he may have not been able to enter into those contracts because he's under the conservatorship.
It'd be funny if the NFL sues him.
Yeah, they want their money back.
Yeah, it just seems like, to me, and I could be wrong, it seems like a very sad family dispute with maybe a ton of misunderstandings. If there was actual money moving around, the fact that they're not taking any money, they have plenty of money on their own, it doesn't. It makes it very hard for me to just say, oh, that they're evil, nasty. I think somebody made the statement too that they didn't do the adoption because he did have a mother and the family had a relationship with his actual mother and didn't want to take away that motherhood. So the conservatorship was sort of like another angle, say, well, we're his caretakers, but you're still his mother. And I don't know if that's wrong or not, but could it be that people were trying to be sensitive and they wound up going awry on the law or something else just because they were trying to be good with feelings? Is that possible?
I think it's possible. It's hard to disentangle. I really want to get this detail because it sounds like he's got hurt feelings because he thought he was adopted.
Yeah.
And that's going to be a real, like, if you thought you were adopted and then you find out that you weren't, that has to be a kick in the teeth, right? That would, that's going to be a knife in the gut. And, and then there's other things that he might take as kind of a personal insult, like the fact that deal that gives a cut of the net names everybody but him. At least that's what's alleged in the filing there. That would hurt. Yeah, and if
they're claiming that he wrote about it in his book.
Yeah, well, what he wrote about in his book, because I read the clip. I read the excerpt. The full excerpt says that he said, they told him exactly what he said, that because he was 18, adoption wouldn't work, conservatorship would be better, and that, and then he said, well, no matter what the legal formality is, I know we're always family. So that seems to also coincide with him saying they allowed me to think that these were the same, that these were the same thing. And even they're saying we couldn't adopt, so that's why we did this. So the fact of the matter is, even if you go back and look past that at how the adoption laws in Tennessee back then, it says right there you can adopt an adult. So this adult adoption isn't something that's new. It was something that's highly prevalent before, especially before same-sex marriage. It's highly prevalent in, I think, almost every state allows adult adoption. So
I wouldn't think that they would not adopt him just because of inheritance. Don't know anything about Tennessee law on that, but generally you can write kids out if you want.
Yes.
Or leave them in there in a de minimis thing to make sure that that it was known to be purposeful. These people are going to have competent lawyers. Not saying they would want to leave him with something or not, but I don't know their motivation for not adopting him. It does. It's not clear to me.
The other thing that might be a wrinkle on adoption, and I kind of hate to bring this up, but at least where I am, some of those like non-entries can be struck potentially on public interest grounds. And so you can see things like if you leave out people for bad reasons. And so I'm wondering if they were worried that he's going to be like, hey, you left everything to your white kids, but not anything to your black kid. And then that becomes,
good point.
I mean, if nothing else, it would be a social media firestorm, right? So
You mean like we're having now, where we want Sandra Bullock to give her Oscar back?
Oh, that's
played a role.
That's ridiculous. Yeah,
that's the dumbest take on all of this.
Yeah. And people have to understand too. The Blind Side was a movie. It was based on reality, but it wasn't reality. Just like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was based on. It's like nobody thinks Leatherface is out there running around, right? So people have to understand. Obviously, the story is not a documentary. It's somebody retelling a story and making it sensationalized. So all these people are making it seem like, and matter of fact, on the radio shows now, they're saying that Michael Orr was trafficked as a kid. I'm like, what is it? What is how big is him being trafficked? It's going crazy now.
Wow. Well, okay, so I have a question for you on that, Nate. Would this be such a firestorm if the parents were black?
I think so.
If the Tuohys were black?
I think in either situation it would be. I don't think it would be as much as a firestorm if they were black, because I think the cultural text was, hey, there's the white savior complex, because that was the whole knock on the movie. It's the white savior complex. But now that it seems like there's a little bit more, now I think that's the kind of the backlash. We told you so, because I'm getting a lot of that. I told you so. I told you so. And I'm like, no, you know, if someone wants to help someone else out, why does it matter? They are, you know what I'm saying? I think that's something you want to incentivize, that people would want to help children no matter what they look like. But essentially now everything is racist. So
I think that was part of why the movie got made in the first place, though, was that story and that dimension of it. And I think they might have been less likely to make it in the other case, but
well, it's the whole, you know, wrong side of the track story, right? You got someone from one side, and then, you know, they come together and overcome not only cultural differences, but socioeconomic differences and everything to become a family. And that's what families are about. But I'm thinking that that in this case, it's so much that stinks with this. I think unfortunately 80% of NFL players go broke. I'm not sure if Michael is broke, but I'm thinking that may have something to do with it. They're saying that he was trying to get $15 million out of them, or he was going to let the story comes out. I think that's something that if that's proven, that's something that we have to assume. But as of right now, the fact that I know to be true, I know that you can adopt adults in Tennessee, and they're saying their lawyer said you can't. I don't know how you how I can't just ignore that. You know, and they said they gave him $100,000 check. I haven't seen the check, but you know, that fact I think is really damning for them. And I'm sorry, it just is.
I want to hear I'm kind of surprised that the lawyer wasn't named. I would have named the lawyer. I absolutely would have been like, I want you in on this suit, and allege things like malpractice. You know, hey, why didn't you get independent legal advice? How did you not know? The lawyer's probably
still his lawyer.
I mean, well, that's the other really fun thing, is that the lawyer, she represented him on the conservatorship as well. So privilege, confidentiality, gone, because he's also a client on that one. So
she was on both sides of the V.
She was on both sides.
Oh, wow.
That's the allegation anyway. So if that's the case, there's no, they're going to get access to all those documents. That'll be interesting.
That's a major COI. Unless he signed a waiver, but even that, you can't really even sign a waiver for that type of COI though.
Well, and
if both parties come to you and say, hey, listen, we just essentially want you to draft the documents and navigate us through the procedure, but this is our agreement, right? Because then there's no controversy. In that situation, you could have somebody that just helps navigate the proceedings.
But you also would have an obligation to make sure he understood what he was signing.
Yes, that too.
You know, because if somebody comes to me with like, I've already drafted a power of attorney and I just want you to like help execute it, I'm like, whoa, no. You know, we're getting separate lawyers on this. There's no way that's happening. So... yeah,
Somebody saying the lawyer's a family member.
Well, of course they are.
Maybe.
Well, I don't know if they're actually family, because he said that they call her Aunt Debbie, that she was that close.
Like a friend type thing.
Yeah, I think she's just a really close friend that is like a family member, but I don't think she's actually... I don't think she's blood, but I could be wrong.
They didn't adopt her either.
Yeah.
Someone put Nate the lawyer has adult adoption always been an option in Tennessee. Adult adoption's been it's been around for years. I'm telling you, in law school, when I was in law school, they literally teach the adoption cases of same-sex couples from like the 80s and all that stuff. So yes, and then I went back and looked at the previous law. Yes, you can always adopt a child or an adult, because it's a way to allow people in Tennessee, specifically, to allow people to be in the family. That's why it's funny, because when I first saw it, I was like, maybe Tennessee might be one of those rare states that doesn't allow, because you have, there may be some rare state that says we don't allow adult adoption, but they do. They allow it. Texas, Tennessee, New York. Matter of fact, I would be hard pressed to find a state that doesn't allow adult adoption. To be honest with you.
All right.
It's an interesting case.
Well, yeah, it's something to ponder on that. But
Well, I want
Nate-
to say, can I say, if there's anybody out there that just sold their company for $200 million and wants to adopt an adult, that I can handle that.
we're all
there.
here.
Yeah.
All right.
And I don't
Well,
care who the
Nate-
lawyer is. Just do it.
All right. Well, that I think is a perfect place to conclude. Nate, thanks for coming in. What do you have coming up?
I'm changing up my style a little bit. Before I was doing these highly produced videos once or twice a week, but now I'm trying to see if I can do 2 or 3 a week, just going off of interesting trends and stuff online. So, just subscribe to the channel and you'll see my 3 or 4 videos that come out and see if you like something. So that's essentially what I've been doing lately.
Ian.
And he went to
what's
Matsuri. I got
Oh
to
yeah,
meet.
yes.
We got to hug. It was really cute. Nice to meet you. I love that. It was fantastic. Just wanted to say that was a great moment.
Yeah, that was good. Great meeting you too, Chad. That was amazing.
Anyway, sorry to interrupt. Go on.
I've been going through some of the DEP trial transcripts just to see all of the stuff that we couldn't see at the time, because we didn't actually get to see the lawyering during the trial. We got to see the evidence, but not the lawyering. So I'm really enjoying that. I'm also still following up with Baldwin. I'm looking into the OR thing. I covered it on a live stream, but I'm trying to get like a compressed video to just kind of explain the issues in like 10 minutes, because not everyone wants to listen to a several-hour live stream. So that's kind of what I got going on at the moment.
All right,
Runkle of the
Dave.
Dailies.
Oh, sorry.
Me?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So I didn't hear what you said. I'm going to be finishing up the Ethan Crumbly Miller hearing that's going on right now. They should be done by now. I had to stop the closing arguments to come over here, so I'm going to finish that up from this morning. And then I, of course, have Jody Arias every Saturday and Tuesday. We're rewatching that. And then there's going to be the continuation of actually my trial that I tried, civil case, bench trial in May. I've been streaming that. We've done, I think, 3 episodes so far. We probably have 3 more to go. To give you guys an idea of what 90% of the work that attorneys do is actually looks like. It's not these big sensational cases. It's these small little bench trial civil matters. So that's been a lot of fun. I've been critiqued and trolled by my chat, so it's awesome. It's amazing. So that will probably finish up Sunday. And then, so that'll round out my weekend. But check it out. MLS Law Show. Wait, where is it? There we go. Right there.
Chandler.
And then after David's finished with that on Sunday, we're going to try and squeeze in the new Sarah Boone letter. I think it's the letter that she received. And this has to do with some very interesting stuff about her hiring a private investigator to look into her attorney. So that should be fascinating. I believe we're on for Sunday.
Yes, Sunday. Yes.
And then after that, I am just doing LSAT prep and studying for my constitutional law final. So that'll be me. I will be on OJ Thursdays with Jeff next week. And other than that, I will be trying to stream, but I don't have anything concrete planned yet.
Are you doing an
Nice.
LSAT prep stream?
You should do that.
Somebody suggested that, actually. I
That'd be
think
good.
Jeff suggested that. If people are interested, I would love to do that. And Ian, I'm definitely going to be hitting you up. I know I haven't, you've offered some excellent help, and I have questions for you, for sure.
I used to teach the LSAT, and
Yeah.
I mean, it's a nasty test, but it is learnable. So yeah, I'm
bunch
happy
of-
to help out.
A lot of people ask me about it in the chat, like what is it and things like that. So a stream about it would be kind of cool, because
could
it's
do an
not
LSAT
it's
stream.
not like biology for medical students or something. It's a weird little puzzle game kind of test. So it tests your logic ability. It's interesting.
I would
Yeah,
love to do a
some-
stream on that if people want me to. I would be fascinated to, it would be fascinating to discuss, for sure.
Yeah, some of it is literally like, there's a section of logic games that is like, you have 2 canoes, and the rules are this person can't sit with this person, and this person has to sit 2 seats ahead of this person, and then you have to figure out like who could be in the canoe. And if you're wondering what does that have to do with law, well, rarely have I had to figure out who's in which canoe in law.
Yeah, I'm really glad I took symbolic logic in college because that is helping me a lot in my prep, just remembering how to do those formulas and the equations. But it is extremely challenging if you don't have the shorthand for it. So yeah, that's I'm very immersed in that right now. My test is in October.
All right, Steve, take us out.
Normal stuff that I'm streaming with some criminal law updates this morning that I managed to get through, and hopefully again next week. And over the last week, looked at some of Sarah Boone's docket, the history of it, the amount of experts she's had on the case, and the history of her attorney. So if there's new developments on that, I'll be interested to see what you guys have to say about it. And I am happy that Ian's putting out some more content, because if Netflix wants to have some new limited series on Depp v. Heard, who else can they gonna get it from? They don't want to do it themselves, so that's good news for Netflix, I think. Maybe I'll buy a stock.
Apparently that is available in Canada, so I actually need to watch the clip where I'm in,
We watched
where they've
it.
taken. Well, I haven't watched it yet, and so Canada doesn't have the thing the U.S. does, where you have to pre-register it to get damages. So it might be like, hey, you know what? I'll just send this off to a copyright lawyer and be like, hey, I'll take whatever cut at the end of it. Go to town.
Oh, wow.
Nice.
Because you get statutory here without having to pre-register. So it's like,
Well, I know they messed up with Andy from Popcorn Play, because they struck, like he was watching his own stuff, and they copyright struck him saying they owned it. So now that gives him the possibility of now going in, and because they can't now claim fair use, they're claiming ownership. So now that gives him the ownership angle. So he doesn't have to worry about registering anything. He's saying they've essentially stolen and now claimed it against me. So it's a nice little wrinkle.
All right. That might be something that we could talk about next week. I saw the chat was lighting it up, and it's definitely interesting. Netflix does have a pattern of doing this. They've used my material multiple times. Carol Baskin, my John McAfee material was licensed by them, but they copyright claimed me both times. I showed them using my own material. So Netflix has a pattern.
people ask me like, hey, would you want to license it to them? And I'm like, no, I don't want to give them permission to say this is okay or that I agree with it. But I think if I ever do a licensing agreement, it's going to have as an explicit term, you must agree that you will not issue any copyright claims, strikes, etc. against my channel forever. Probably for any reason. Like, hey, I get to, if I'm poaching your stuff later, suck it up. But just a note,
that would be pretty broad.
Well,
suddenly, here, watch Netflix for free on Ian Runkle,
or
hey,
just
you got your favorite show,
or just hey, with regards to my own content, reacting to this, you will not strike me, and just put in hey, you agree you're going to owe me if you do.
right,
you'd have to pick
enough.
a suitable liquidated damages amount, but yeah.
I like the audacity of that, Ian. That's great.
And that note, everybody, if you like this kind of content, I do it every Friday. Sometimes if I'm not here, Nate is kind enough to step in, but please consider subscribing, help grow the channel, share it with a friend. We release clips of this material too, if you liked a particular segment, to share around, and we'll see you next week.